Chapter 656. Bang! Seeing that the deer herd was about to run away, Jiang Hai fired a shot from a distance, but unfortunately, not to mention the deer, he didn't even shoot down a single hair. The ground was full of snow and mud. Even the F-650 was a little tired, but the deer could naturally pass through here. Who the F*** CK? Looking at the white-tailed deer in front of him that was still wagging its tail, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curse. Our most important thing is to drive these guys into the mountains, not really to hunt them. Of course, if they don't leave, then you don't have to be polite, but you are so far away, are you sure you can hit them? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the police car also came over at this time. Looking at Jiang Hai's somewhat angry look, the police in the police car couldn't help but laugh and talk. Jiang Hai's relationship with the townspeople is more or less tangled, but his relationship with the police is quite solid. After all, when Jiang Hai's manor was attacked, the police station helped a lot, and Jiang Hai also donated a lot of money to the police station. So they don't mind joking with Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai won't care about this. It's useless to talk about that. If you have the guts, then kill a few for me to see. Jiang Hai also said as he looked at the police with contempt. We are supervising. But the police didn't want to get angry with Jiang Hai, so they said with a smile. Facts proved that Jiang Hai soon had a chance to get revenge. The car drove a few hundred meters forward, and they encountered another wave of deer. However, this wave of deer was much larger than the previous wave. There were more than 30 of them, and almost half of them were adult male deer. Among these deer, there were white-tailed deer, reindeer, and moose. After hearing the sound of the engine, these deer didn't escape. Instead, they raised their heads and looked at Jiang Hai. When they found that they were humans, these deer took the initiative to lower their heads and prepared to attack. When Jiang Hai saw this situation, he couldn't help but laugh. He wasn't afraid of these guys fighting back. He was only afraid that these guys would run away. That way, he wouldn't have a chance to take revenge. Looking at the deer in front of him, Jiang Hai directly opened the window, and half of his body directly went out of the car window. Just like in movies, when the villains were chasing after the main characters, they would shoot at the main characters. Jiang Hai's current actions were the same, but it looked really cool. Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, Belle also leaned out. There were 5 people in his car, and Knurson Peters didn't know how to use a gun. John Turner was still young. He was still in college. He was not old enough to play with guns. He was just here to watch the fun. Although Lewis Turner had his own pistol and rifle, he didn't bring them back. Moreover, he was now the driver. Therefore, there were only 2 people in Jiang Hai's car who could shoot. Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the police and the people in the other pickup couldn't help but secretly curse Jiang Hai, this crazy guy. He wasn't afraid of falling out of the car, but obviously, Jiang Hai and Belle didn't need to worry about this problem. Their legs were enough to fix them in the car. Moo! Seeing the 3 cars rushing over, the dozen male deer didn't dodge. Instead, they lowered their heads and directly rushed over. Deer were very timid, but there was an old saying, even a rabbit will bite when it's anxious, let alone a deer. They couldn't survive in the mountains, so they went down the mountain. Now humans were still driving them into the mountains. This meant that they were going to die. How could they not resist? But for humans, whether they died in the mountains or not, it was good enough that they invaded human territory. If such a scene was seen by some members of animal protection organizations who loved animals, they would probably sacrifice themselves to protect these deer. Unfortunately, there were no such people here at this time. As a slightly larger male deer roared, the dozen deer quickly ran over. Seeing the deer coming over, the 2 cars immediately stopped, opened the doors, and prepared to fight. But Jiang Hai and the others rushed over. When the 2 sides were only about 50 meters apart, Jiang Hai pulled the trigger first. Bang! With a loud sound, the leading male deer couldn't help but tremble. Then, its legs went soft, and it screamed and knelt on the snow in front of it. On the other side, Belle also pulled the trigger. With another bang, another stag fell to the ground. When the 2 largest deer fell, the rest of the deer that were rushing over couldn't help but feel scared. They looked at Jiang Hai and Belle in surprise. As for the doe behind them, they were already scared silly. But Zhang Hai and the others weren't. They quickly reloaded the next bullet. In fact, it was just a quick pull. Zhang Hai and Belle pulled the trigger again. This time, 2 more deer fell into a pool of blood. This time, the deer reacted. Their natural cowardice also showed at this time. The remaining male deer, without saying anything, turned around and ran. As the male deer ran, the doe and the fawns also ran. You bastards, don't run if you have the guts. It turned out that when the deer herd wanted to escape, except for the fawns, Zhang Hai's car couldn't catch up with any deer. But these fawns, Zhang Hai and the others couldn't hunt them. So, looking at the deer herd that had run away in the blink of an eye, Zhang Hai had no other choice but to curse. Because the gun in his hand didn't work after 50 meters. Who knows where the deer bullet will fall? So, Zhang Hai had to stop the car. Looking at the exasperated Zhang Hai, the middle-aged policeman couldn't help but laugh and say, "Okay, Zhang, these guys should know that they were wrong. It's better for them to go back and compete with a Canadian deer herd for territory. Although the outside world is very exciting, it's also dangerous." In fact, Winthrop absolutely hated these deer more than Zhang Hai, but they were already used to it. Next, Zhang Hai and the others continued to look for the deer outside the town. In fact, it turned out that Zhang Hai was actually very unlucky that day. According to the fat policeman, there were about 300 deer that entered Winthrop's territory. After sweeping around, almost half of them had left. The remaining half, which was more than 100, were scattered all over the town. The deer that Zhang Hai met that night was actually the sum of all the deer herds. Deer are also animals, and animals are afraid of the cold. And deer can't wear clothes like humans. They can only huddle together and sleep to resist the cold. If Zhang Hai hadn't appeared there that night, the deer herd would have gathered there for a night and dispersed the next day. Unlike now, Zhang Hai had searched here for a long time. Except for the 2 waves of deer, they didn't find any other deer. Even if Belle followed the deer's footprints for a long time and didn't find anything, the sky was gradually getting dark. "Hey, Zhang, we have to go back to the town. Deer hunting isn't a matter of a day or 2. We are at a disadvantage at night." Looking at Zhang Hai, who was still looking around, the policeman here also drove the car over and said to Zhang Hai. Although he was somewhat unwilling, Zhang Hai could only nod his head, indicating that he agreed. Then everyone headed towards the direction of the small town. But just as everyone was about to drive to the town in a forest, Zhang Hai found a huge guy. As soon as he saw this guy, Zhang Hai's eyes turned red. Following his gaze, it wasn't difficult for everyone to see that in the forest next to the town, there was a huge deer eating the leaves that hadn't fallen off the tree. This deer should be a reindeer, but its size was so big that it made people's hair stand on end. The fork on its head was roughly about 18. This meant that this deer was a very strong male deer. Its huge size allowed this deer to be fearless in the forest, even brown bears and mountain lions, the top predators in North America. But the only thing that surprised people was that this deer was limping a little. "Motherf asterisk cur, I actually bumped into you." Looking at this deer, others were at most amazed, but Zhang Hai hated it so much that his teeth itched. Because even if this deer turned into ashes, Zhang Hai wouldn't recognize it wrongly. This guy was the one who attacked him. Moreover, it didn't give up and attacked him. Finally, after being shot by him, it fled into the forest. But unexpectedly, it didn't return to the Alabama mountains, but continued to stay here and eat. As the saying goes, when enemies meet, their eyes turn red. There was no need to say anything at all. Zhang Hai asked Louis Turner to stop the car, then he rushed into the forest with his gun. At this time, the huge reindeer had also heard the sound of the car below. Originally, it was going to hide in the forest, but when it saw Zhang Hai, it naturally met its enemy. Seeing that Zhang Hai dared to come alone to kill it, this big guy also mooed. It lowered its head and rushed toward Zhang Hai. Looking at the huge reindeer rushing down from above, Zhang Hai knew that he couldn't fight it head-on. This reindeer was definitely an extraordinarily large fellow. Its body length was almost 2 meters, which was not much different from a moose. Without counting the antlers, it should be about 6 meters tall. With the antlers, it was definitely 2 meters tall. Such a big guy rushing toward Jiang Hai. Its power was quite scary, but Jiang Hai was destined to kill it today. Bang! In front of the rushing reindeer, Jiang Hai directly shot. The bullet instantly penetrated the guy's chest, directly beating it up. Its body fell down weakly, but the huge inertia still made it rush toward Jiang Hai. However, at this time, Jiang Hai suddenly turned sideways and dodged to the distance. He watched the reindeer slide down from the top of the mountain. Wow, this is a really big guy. If I didn't look at the antlers, I would have thought it was a moose. The car behind also drove over at this time. Looking at the huge reindeer sliding down, the police couldn't help but say in surprise, "One must know that the reindeer's head is a very good collection, and the reindeer that is hunted now belongs to the hunter. It seems that Jiang Hai's collection will have another very good thing." At this time, Jiang Hai also slid down the hillside. "This damn guy, you are finally dead." Looking at this reindeer, although Jiang Hai was cursing, there was a smile on his face. In the beginning, he was quite embarrassed by this guy, but in the end, only Jiang Hai could stand here with a smile. After venting, Jiang Hai and the others threw the big guy behind the pickup truck. Then, everyone went to the town to count the day's harvest. In Jiang Hai's team, only Jiang Hai harvested 5 reindeer. Because Jiang Hai now has a good relationship with the Iroquois, Jiang Hai donated 3 of the 5 reindeer, and the meat was distributed to the people in the town. As for the heads of the 5 reindeer, they were all made into specimens and all belonged to Jiang Hai. Of course, this will take some time. After returning to the town, Jiang Hai deliberately told Xiaoya that he had killed the big reindeer. After hearing this, Xiaoya was very happy. This was not to say that they were bloodthirsty. After all, those guys almost killed them. It would be strange if they were merciful to them. Anyway, no matter what other people say, Jiang Hai has a deep hatred for these deer. Moreover, he is not a wildlife conservation expert. Compared to protecting these wild animals, he feels that animals are the real good ones when served on the table. In the next few days, Jiang Hai and the others went out to hunt deer, but the number of deer was constantly decreasing. Most of the deer were driven back to the Appalachian Mountains to cause trouble for the Canadian deer. A small number of deer were killed by Jiang Hai and the others. In 3 days, the whole town killed a total of 37 deer, and Jiang Hai's family killed 10 alone. The old people in the town joked that Jiang Hai should be called the deer's nemesis. In any case, December 31st was the last day of the year. During the day, the deer near Winthrop were no longer a threat. All the deer that entered the town had been driven away. There were only a few that did not leave, and they did not pose any threat to the townspeople. Seeing this, Mayor Wallace officially announced the end of the deer hunt. Jiang Hai also took back his ornaments from the Iroquois. They were specimens made of the heads of 10 adult male deer. The heads of these male deer had at least 12 bifurcated heads. Jiang Hai chose to kill these male deer. As for the female deer and the fawns, under normal circumstances, he wouldn't kill them. The heads of these male deer were hung in Jiang Hai's study room on the 2nd floor. When one walked in, it was really scary. After hanging these deer heads, Jiang Hai went downstairs. As soon as he arrived, he smelled a very fragrant smell. "What are we eating tonight? It smells so good." Smelling the aroma, Jiang Hai walked into the kitchen and asked excitedly. Hearing that it was Jiang Hai, Xiaoya turned her head and looked at Jiang Hai with a smile. "You hunted so many deer back. It's useless to freeze them at home, so I made venison hot pot. It's very nutritious." Chapter 657. It really wasn't easy to build a ranch in Dubai, at least in Jiang Hai's opinion. In fact, he wasn't too concerned about this business. There wasn't much to say about it. It was indeed a lot worse. If you wanted to build a camel farm in the middle of a desert, there was still a chance, but if you wanted to build a pastoral area, that was bullsh*t. It was precisely because of this that after Du Feynman left, Jiang Hai wasn't too concerned about his pasture business. What he didn't expect was that Du Feynman would actually call him at this moment to tell him that the ranch was done. "Are you sure?" After hearing the news, Zhang Hai looked at his phone with some doubt. It was indeed Du Feimin's number and voice. It didn't seem like he was joking. Did this guy really finish building the ranch? Of course, I'm sure. I wouldn't joke about dollar. If you have time in the next few days, come to our place. Although we have a lot of experts in building ranches, we still need your pasture. You're the most important part. If anything happens, all our previous efforts will be wasted. Du Feimin agreed with what Zhang Hai said. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai looked like he was in a daze. He didn't expect Du Feimin to really finish building the ranch. The more people stayed at home, the more unwilling they were to go out, the more afraid they were of strangers, and the less they liked social situations. Zhang Hai had been very comfortable at home these days, so after hearing what Du Feimin said, Zhang Hai's first reaction was to refuse. But the problem was that he was the one who got Du Feimin to build the ranch. If he didn't go, it wouldn't be very good. Then I'll take a look in the next few days. If I want to go, I'll call you. After hesitating for a moment, Zhang Hai still decided to go. Hearing that Zhang Hai was coming, Du Feimin was naturally very happy. He patted his chest and told Zhang Hai that since Zhang Hai was here, he would definitely entertain Zhang Hai well and let him look forward to it. Zhang Hai chuckled at Du Feimin's hospitality. However, he indeed had to make a trip to the matter he had caused. After talking to the family, no one objected to Zhang Hai's decision to go to Dubai. In Bernice's view, it was inevitable that Zhang Hai would go to Dubai for work. Since Bernice didn't say anything, the others didn't say anything either. Zhang Hai left the manor in the middle of January after confirming that they would go to the capital in early February and then to Bing City. This time, they were going to Dubai. Although Zhang Hai had some trust in Du Feimin, it was the Middle East. Nothing was certain. Therefore, Zhang Hai still took Azalina with him. With this woman around, he didn't need to worry too much about his own safety. Robbins Garcia drove Zhang Hai and Azalina to Boston's General Logan International Airport. Although Boston didn't have a direct flight to Huaxia, there were still flights to Dubai. Emirates Airlines and JetBlue Airlines. However, the price of the ticket was almost $1,000, which was more than 7 or 8,000 RMB. It was much more expensive than Huaxia's flight to the United States. Zhang Hai was taking a first-class flight. A ticket cost $23,000, which was nearly 140,000 RMB. 140,000 RMB was gone after one flight. Moreover, Zhang Hai had to buy 2 tickets to take 2 flights. After sending Zhang Hai and the others to General Logan International Airport, Robbins Garcia left. Zhang Hai and the others also entered the VIP lounge and boarded there. Dubai was actually not far from Huaxia, but it was still quite far from the United States. Zhang Hai's flight took a total of 12 hours before landing at Dubai Airport. This was called Dubai Airport, and it was also the largest airport in Dubai. Zhang Hai and Azalina also walked out of the airport. As soon as they walked out of the airport, Zhang Hai felt the sun in Dubai. However, it was not the same as the desert sun in his imagination. At this time, Dubai was quite cool. This was also the most suitable time of the year to visit Dubai. The sun was shining in the sky, but the temperature was not high. In January, the average daily temperature in Dubai was 24 degrees, and the lowest was 14 degrees. In addition, it was close to the sea, so the sea breeze was quite cool. Although the sun was a little too strong, this was indeed a tourist season. Zhang Hai saw tourists from all over the world at the airport. As soon as they left the airport, they kept taking photos. Zhang Hai was the same. He kept taking photos with his mobile phone and shared them with his friends to anger those people. As for Azalina, she stood calmly behind Zhang Hai. There were so many people, so she had to do a good job of security. Mr. Zhang Hai, right? Hello, I am Mr. Du Feimin's bodyguard. Mr. Du Feimin is waiting for you in the parking lot over there. But at this time, a man in a black suit came over. As soon as he walked in, Azalina had already appeared in front of Zhang Hai and separated him from Zhang Hai. Fortunately, this bodyguard knew when to advance and retreat. When he was 2 meters away from Zhang Hai, he stopped and respectfully said to Zhang Hai. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai also looked in the direction he came from. When he saw this, Zhang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips. He was quite sure that Du Feynman had indeed come to pick him up, because at this time, there was a row of cars in the distance. And in this fleet, there was only one kind of car, Rolls-Royce. Who would play like this except for the Middle Eastern tycoons? Of course, these cars weren't all the same. Otherwise, how could they show off Du Feynman's difference? These Rolls-Royces were all black, and only one was white. There were a lot of gold decorations on the outside. The car was also longer than the other Rolls-Royces. Needless to say, this car must be Du Feynman's. Then Zhang Hai followed the bodyguard, with Azalina. When they came to the front of the fleet, Zhang Hai found that there was a circle of people standing outside the fleet. These people were all like the bodyguard, wearing black suits, separating the crowd from the fleet. It looked really ostentatious. When Zhang Hai came over, the back door of the white Rolls-Royce that had been closed was also opened by a bodyguard. Then, he saw Du Feynman, who was wearing the traditional clothes of the Arab countries, walking out with a smile. "Hey, my dear Zhang Hai, you are finally here." Seeing Zhang Hai, Du Feynman was very excited and shouted loudly. "Hey bro, dear is not used here." After hugging Du Feynman, Zhang Hai also said with a smile, "Is that so? Haha, well, I am indeed not guy one. Let's go, bro. Take a look at the team I have carefully prepared for you." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman said with a smile. Then, he led Zhang Hai to the back seat of his Rolls-Royce. As for Azalina, she sat in the car behind this one. In Du Feynman's car, besides the driver, there were only the two of them. The others were not qualified to sit there. It should be known that in this world, the United States should be the most liberal country. Americans were the product of racial integration. This country had Hwasya, British, Indian, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, South American, and so on. Every country and every race had its own culture and history. If everything was carried out according to the culture of each race, wouldn't it be depressing? Talking to the British all the time, kissing the French when they met, and bowing to the Japanese when they met? Wouldn't it be exhausting? Therefore, Americans were a very free country with no customs. This was the product of racial integration. But the Arabians were different. Although they were not looking for trouble, their teachings were sometimes a little. Especially in the Middle East, the United Arab Emirates was a joint emirate. It was not a complete country. The division of ranks and classes was quite strict. The one who controlled the lifeline of the whole country was none other than the royal family. What GC? What democracy? They were nothing here. Here, whoever was the emperor was the most powerful. This was not a constitutional monarchy, but a complete monarchy. Although Du Feynman was not the emperor, according to Hwasya, he was considered a prince. Even if he could not be given the title of King I, it was not a problem to be given the title of King II. Therefore, in Dubai, he was much nobler than the average king. Even the bodyguards who were here to protect his safety were not allowed to sit in his car, especially when there was no crisis. The reason why Zhang Hai could sit here was that he was not a citizen of this country. Secondly, he was Du Feynman's friend. Thirdly, Zhang Hai's identity was not ordinary. He was a billionaire and had a relationship with the higher-ups of Hwasya. There was no need to say more. "Brother, we have the most fun here recently. You will definitely love our place." The motorcade slowly drove away. Du Feynman also laughed and said to Zhang Hai, for him, there was no place better than Dubai. Indeed, Zhang Hai did not think that other places were better than Winthrop. This was the so-called territorial awareness. He thought that wherever he could control was the best. Ordinary people could only control their own homes. Therefore, there was an old saying that one's own dog house was not as good as gold or silver. The weather here is really good. You have to do your part as the host. Opening the window, Zhang Hai looked at the buildings around the city and could not help but laugh. Of course, the most eye-catching in his eyes should be the legendary Burj Khalifa. It was really too high. This is necessary. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman also said with a smile. Not to mention the friendship between the two, he also needed Zhang Hai's help. How could he not treat Zhang Hai well? This was simply impossible. The car that the two were in was constantly speeding on the road. Even if they encountered a red light, they would not stop. Dubai's traffic police would clean up their mess. This lawless attitude made Jiang Hai very envious. He was the local tyrant of Winthrop. However, he still had to abide by the law. It seemed that the ordinary rich people were indeed a lot worse than these nouveau riche royals. After speeding for about half an hour, the car stopped in front of a large villa. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the Middle Eastern-style villa in front of him and could not help but nod. The style was not bad, but the problem was that it seemed to be a little too white. Perhaps the people here liked white. However, Jiang Hai did not dislike white. Thinking about Xiaoya, he still liked white, whether it was the people or the buildings. While looking at the villa, Du Feimin also came out from the other side. "This is where you will stay when you are here. This is one of my villas in Dubai. It is not very big. Do you mind?" Du Feimin said with a smile as he patted Jiang Hai's shoulder. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai could not help but roll his eyes. This is not very big? The villa in front of him was almost the same size as his main villa, and this was only one of his villas in Dubai. Sigh, I should learn not to talk to nouveau riches when I have nothing to do. Otherwise, I will often be affected. Come in. The party I prepared for you is inside. Ignoring Jiang Hai's rolling eyes, Du Feimin put his arm around Jiang Hai's shoulder and walked into the villa. When the door opened, Jiang Hai's eyes unconsciously widened. Oh my God, what the hell is this? Looking at the situation in front of him, Jiang Hai's face was filled with confusion. Welcome, Lord Du Feimin, Lord Jiang Hai. In Jiang Hai's line of sight, there were countless, maybe dozens, maybe hundreds of girls wearing very simple bikinis, clothes. Black, white, yellow, all kinds of skin colors, tall, short, thin, petite, cute, countless beauties. After seeing the door open and Jiang Hai and Du Feimin walking in, they all bowed 90 degrees and said loudly. Looking at them, Jiang Hai was completely confused. What the hell is this? I specially prepared these girls for you. Looking at the girls in your villa, I know that you like them very much. These girls are all yours. You can do whatever you want. Looking at Jiang Hai's confused look, Du Feimin raised his eyebrows and said. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, was speechless as he looked at him. Was he a perverted demon in his eyes? Besides, even if I have the heart, in the face of so many girls, I feel that I may be hollowed out. However, Du Feimin didn't give Jiang Hai a chance to refute and directly waved his hand and said loudly, Come, ladies. This is your master for these few days, Jiang Hai. Next, let me see you use your broad hearts to take care of your master. After these girls heard his words, they all smiled and ran over. Then, Jiang Hai walked into the villa. Jiang Hai didn't even have a chance to resist. Of course, under such circumstances, resistance was quite unnecessary. Chapter 658. Boss. Jiang Hai was gently woken up by a familiar voice. However, as soon as he opened his eyes, Jiang Hai felt an extreme headache. He knew that this was a symptom caused by the excessive stimulation of alcohol and hormones. Yesterday was really too crazy. After Jiang Hai and Du Feimin entered the villa, Jiang Hai was pulled away. Then Du Feimin left, leaving only Jiang Hai. While enjoying the delicacies that Du Feimin sent over, he also enjoyed so many hot beauties. When men and women met under such circumstances, it naturally became the only law. These women quickly took off their simple clothes and then licked Jiang Hai's body from all over his body. Jiang Hai had never enjoyed such a feeling before. He did not know how many women he had f***ked last night and how many times he had f***ked. According to his memory, there were probably no less than 20 people. According to his estimation, his elder brother might have entered the bodies of no less than 50 people in the end, but he could not remember the specific situation. Of course, he could not have f***ked 50 people directly. If he did that, even he would not be able to withstand it. Drinking wine and eating while king women, such a life was really rotten to the extreme. It seemed that Jiang Hai only fell asleep after 11:00 in the evening. Rather than saying that he fell asleep, it was better to say that he fainted. To be honest, he had slept until now. The aftereffects were still very strong. It would be strange if those rich people who played like this every day were healthy. Hiss, what's the matter? After rubbing his temples, Zhang Hai sat up from the bed and glanced at the unusually large bed. However, at this time, it was already empty, leaving only him and Azalina, who had woken him up. Mr. Du Feynman is already downstairs. Didn't he say that he would take you to Dubai to have fun today? Looking at Zhang Hai, Azalina chuckled, then said to Zhang Hai. Hearing what she said, Zhang Hai nodded, then jumped out of bed. Although he still felt a little weak under his feet, after resting for a while, he felt much better. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, Zhang Hai went downstairs and found that Du Feynman had been waiting here for a long time. After apologizing, the two smiled and left. Compared to the situation when he went to pick up Zhang Hai yesterday, Du Feynman was much more low-key today. The long motorcade was gone and replaced by 3 cars. 2 of them were for the bodyguards, and 1 was for them. Because Azalina would be a little uncomfortable with other cars, Zhang Hai deliberately mentioned that she could sit in the front passenger seat. Originally, Du Feynman would not sit in the same car with the bodyguards, but Azalina was not only a bodyguard, but also Zhang Hai's woman, so it didn't matter if he made an exception. However, although the motorcade was smaller, the cars were still the same cars, Rolls-Royce, the symbol of the nouveau riche. After getting in the car, Zhang Hai and the others did not go sightseeing but went to eat first. Yesterday, Zhang Hai had already seen the food in Dubai. Today, he saw it again and it was really good. The food in Dubai was a combination of the characteristics of Bahrain, Iran, Morocco, Ethiopia, Zulia, Bajadin, and India. After all, it was a tourist city. Of course, there were also various specialties of the United Arab Emirates. For example, the famous Arabian roast chicken, Arabian desserts, Arabian roast beef, roast lamb, and so on. Speaking of which, Arabian food was somewhat similar to Western food. It was also divided into appetizers, soup, salad, barbecue, desserts, beef, mutton, and so on. Now, Du Feynman was going to take Zhang Hai to the Sailing Hotel, the only 7-star hotel in the world. They had only heard of its reputation before, but they had never eaten in it. In this hotel, there were a total of 2 restaurants that were indispensable. The best restaurant was called the Imahara Submarine Restaurant, located at the bottom of the Sailing Hotel. Du Feynman naturally had to clear it out when he came to eat. After all, this was the real power of the royal family in Dubai. However, if other people came to eat, it would be a little troublesome. If a tour group came to eat here, if they booked online, the price would be $410 per person. If they came with a tour group, it would be 765 dirhams, equivalent to 1,300 renminbi, per person. However, there were only 3 dishes and individual customers could not enjoy this. Generally, lunch and dinner needed to be booked. It was normal for 2 people to spend 4,000 to 5,000 RMB for a meal here. This was assuming that they could not eat anything good. If they came to eat like Zhang Hai and Du Feynman, it would cost at least a few 100,000 RMB. This was because the fish that Du Feynman ordered alone was worth 50,000 renminbi. It was a complete sume, which was also known as the rippled lip fish, an extremely rare species in the world. In the United States, no one dared to catch it, let alone eat it. However, here, Du Feynman had the final say. One had to admit that the environment of this restaurant was really amazing. Sitting there, the world under the sea was right next to them. Coral and fish swam around, and the transparency was extremely high. It made people feel as if they were eating in an aquarium. The feeling was really good. In addition to this restaurant, the restaurant on the top floor was also a must. However, this was the place that Du Feynman had arranged for the evening. During the day, they could enjoy the sea view underwater, and at night they could go to the top floor to enjoy the night view. This was something that rich people should enjoy. After this meal, Du Feynman took Zhang Hai to tour Dubai. There were still many things to visit in Dubai. For example, the Burj Khalifa, which was actually called the Burj Khalifa. The Burj Khalifa was just a nickname given by tourists. The tallest building in the world was still quite intimidating. In addition, the beach outside the Burj Khalifa was also a popular place for tourists. In addition, the artificial Palm Island, which was known as the 8th wonder of the world, was also very beautiful. There was also the Jumeirah Mosque, the Miracle Garden, and the World Trade Center. In addition, there was also the Taj Arabia. This was also a recent plan in Dubai. They spent £665 million, about 6.8 billion renminbi, to replicate the Taj Mahal. The size of the replica Taj Mahal was not only 5 times the size of the historical original, but it also had restaurants, a shopping center, a 5-star hotel with 300 rooms, as well as service departments, a bridal shop, and other service facilities. It could be said that once this was completed, it would instantly become one of the best places for rich people to get married. Of course, the premise was that you were rich. When it came to Dubai, shopping was the most important thing. There were many things to visit, but the most attractive thing was shopping. There were many large shopping malls in Dubai, but because Dubai was a duty-free zone, it was the cheapest place for goods from all over the world. It was much cheaper than Hong Kong. To attract business, Dubai would hold some discount events at different times every year. For example, from June to July. This year's new spring clothes had just entered the market, and last year's clothes would be sold off at a cheaper price. December to February of the next year, which was now. This was a plan for next year's spring clothing. During this period, many large shopping centers would have discounts. In addition to the duty-free shops and famous brands, the most attractive places in Dubai were its gold market and spice market. In the spice market, the most famous spice was saffron. As mentioned earlier, saffron had nothing to do with Tibet. These plants were probably produced in Shanghai, and they were originally not local plants. Instead, they were imported from the Middle East and India. In China, saffron was a medicine and must be soaked in water. But in Dubai, saffron was only a spice, although it was still very expensive. As for the gold market, it was even more famous. Dubai was the most famous gold distribution center. 1/10 of the world's gold transactions took place here. The people of Dubai really liked gold. The gold ornaments here were of good quality and were much cheaper than in China. This was mainly because of the Arabian customs. In Dubai, the bigger the gold ornament, the better it was. When getting married, it was necessary to wear gold all over the body. When getting married, it was necessary to wear a few sets of gold ornaments. Otherwise, people would look down on them. With such a custom, there would be a market. That was how Dubai's gold market slowly developed. It was really quite scary. Even on the streets, there were gold vending machines. It was like selling drinks in China. It was hard to understand. Were they not afraid that someone would come and smash the machines? But Du Feimin's words made Zhang Hai understand immediately. Because it was illegal to smash the machines in Dubai, and the degree of the crime depended on the mood of the royal family. In other words, the law was not accurate. Maybe you killed a person, but the royal family was in a good mood and only sentenced you to 3 years. It was also possible that you spat on the ground and the royal family was in a bad mood, so they directly executed you. Of course, this was just an example. If the royal family was really so reckless, there would be chaos here. Everything was governed by the law. Most of the time, the royal family was too lazy to destroy the integrity of the people. While walking, Zhang Hai looked around. Unknowingly, it was time for a day of sightseeing. Zhang Hai and the others also sat in a car and went to the sailing hotel. At night, Du Feimin booked the top floor to entertain Zhang Hai. But on the way back, Zhang Hai found a lot of homeless people on the roadside. Some of the commoners did not seem to have a good life. He found that Dubai was not as rich as he had imagined. Indeed, the rich were very rich, but the poor were much more than he had imagined. In the past, there was a saying in China that one could become rich by picking up trash here. Now, it seemed to be nonsense. The environment here was not suitable for humans to live in. The gap between the rich and poor is really big. Zhang Hai said to Du Feimin as he looked at the people outside the car. Those people are not from Dubai. Du Feimin shrugged and said helplessly. This made Zhang Hai feel a little strange. Those people are foreigners who came to work. There are no poor people in Dubai. This is related to our country's policy. Looking at Zhang Hai's puzzled eyes, Du Feimin could not help but explain with a smile. According to him, there were no poor people in Dubai. The premise was that you had to be from Dubai. In Dubai, you did not need to worry about a house because from the moment you were born, you would be assigned a 1,000 to 1,500 square meter piece of land for free. This land completely belonged to you. You could build a house on it and it would be yours for a long time. But this had to wait. It was not something you could get when you were born. You had to apply for it and then queue. If you started queuing from the moment you were born, it would be approved when you were about 30 years old. At that time, you could build a house on it. As for the money to build a house, you had to earn it yourself. But for the people of Dubai, this was not a difficult thing. Because of the Dubai government's rules, no matter what kind of job it was, even if it was sweeping the floor, washing dishes, cleaning, no matter what kind of job it was, the minimum wage in Dubai was 17,000 renminbi, and the poverty line in Dubai was 37,000 renminbi a month. In other words, if you were a healthy person in Dubai, as long as you went out to work, you could earn at least 50,000 renminbi a month. This was also the starting salary of a university graduate. 50,000 renminbi was the same as the monthly salary of 3,000 renminbi in China. If you were old and still wanted to go out to work, you could earn more than 20,000 renminbi a month. This was the reality. If you used the construction team in Huaxia to build a house, although it was much more expensive than in China, the people of Dubai who earn more than 1 million RMB a year only needed to save for a year. This kind of government policy made it so that there were not many people in Dubai. Therefore, in Dubai, wanting to become a citizen was not an easy thing. First, you have to be religious. Secondly, you have to have the ability to immigrate. Like Zhang Hai, it didn't matter. He had more than 1 billion and it was more than 1 billion a year. He would be welcomed wherever he wanted to go. However, Dubai did not accept skilled immigrants. To be honest, it was not very desirable for women to obtain citizenship through marriage. First, you had to believe in the religion here. Second, you had to allow your husband to fool around without any complaints. You also had to share your husband with 3 other women. When you went out, you had to wrap yourself thickly and not take off your veil. You could only show your face to your husband. You could not go out to work or play. If you were beaten to death by your husband, your death would be in vain. If your husband beat you, you had to endure it because the law did not support divorce for women. It was useless even if you sued him. All in all, if a man wanted to immigrate to Dubai, it was very troublesome. If he did not have a few billion RMB in his pocket or the top international academic ability, it was almost impossible to immigrate to Dubai. It was easy for a woman to immigrate, but she had to endure hardships. Unless you could endure it just for the sake of money until the man died, then you could remarry. Chapter 6:59. It was undeniable that the laws and customs of Dubai were quite beneficial to men. Listening to this, Zhang Hai had some thoughts of joining this place, but he quickly rejected it. He could only eat beef and mutton. Zhang Hai couldn't stand it. If they didn't let him eat pork, he would die of discomfort. The restaurant on the top floor of the Sailboat Hotel was called Sky View Bar. The Sailboat Hotel wasn't the Burj Khalifa. The hotel was only 200 meters high. It wasn't particularly high. After taking the elevator up, Zhang Hai and Du Feimin also had a good meal. When sending Zhang Hai back, Du Feimin asked Zhang Hai if he needed to call the girls back at night. He also asked if they needed to go to the ranch in 3 days. It would take 2 days to go to the ranch. He wanted to take advantage of these 2 days to finish his work. During the 3 days that Zhang Hai would stay here, he couldn't accompany Zhang Hai, so he asked if Zhang Hai needed anything. As for women, Zhang Hai didn't mind. His legs were still a little weak. As for his request, Zhang Hai asked for a car. Of course, he didn't ask for a car. They also wanted to go out and have a look. It would be more convenient to have a car. Hearing Zhang Hai's request, Du Feimin had nothing to say and agreed. After sending Zhang Hai and Azalina back to the villa, he left. Zhang Hai and Azalina slept in separate rooms. This was also Azalina's request. Although she could give her body to Zhang Hai at any time, she was now on a mission. She had to protect Zhang Hai's safety. Therefore, she couldn't be distracted for even a second. Therefore, if Zhang Hai wanted it, they could wait until they returned to Winthrop. Azalina didn't feel safe in Winthrop. The next morning, when Zhang Hai and Azalina woke up, they found a sports car in front of the villa. This was the car that Du Feynman gave to Zhang Hai. Looking at the sports car, Zhang Hai couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake his head. He just wanted to find a means of transportation, but it seemed that Du Feynman thought too much. He wasn't going out to flirt, so why would he get such a good car? Bugatti Veyron, a famous sports car brand in France. Zhang Hai didn't need any data to make up the number of words. This kind of thing could be found on the internet. The selling price in China was 25 million renminbi. Of course, even so, this car was rare in China. However, for a tycoon like Du Feynman, this was just a car. That's all, it was just a car. It was just a gift for Zhang Hai. Although he smiled bitterly and shook his head, Zhang Hai didn't want to change to an ordinary car. It was a sports car. Although it wasn't his first time sitting in one, it was his first time driving. After sitting in the car with Azalina, Zhang Hai sped toward Dubai. To be honest, Dubai wasn't small and there were many places to visit. Zhang Hai didn't encounter any dramatic events. 3 days passed by quickly. During these 3 days, he also learned a little about Dubai. Of course, it wasn't as scary as the legends he heard in China. In the past, Zhang Hai heard that when he played in Dubai, he would often meet some rich people. Some said that beautiful women would be given a Louis Vuitton bag when they went out and smiled. Some said that when they went out to play in the desert, they would meet a local, and because they chatted happily, they would receive a sports car the next day. Zhang Hai responsibly told everyone that this was all nonsense. Maybe they would really give it to him, but these people's motives were obviously not pure. When a man gave a woman something, it was nothing more than one thing. He wanted to be with the woman. Bags and cars were the best things. There were also the buildings here, the residential areas piled up on the sea, the revolving skyscrapers with different windows, and the palace-like hotels. There were all of them here, including the ones that were under construction. However, most of these things were just for show. At least in the eyes of a pragmatist like Zhang Hai, these things were actually useless. The most important thing was that Dubai's tourism development now seemed to be a failure. There were too many unfinished buildings near the city. Many of them were built by developers from Huaxia. It was said that during the summer in Dubai, the hottest temperature could reach 50 degrees. Every year, many construction workers died from the heat. He really didn't know if it was necessary for them to earn this money. Moreover, this money was so cheap in the eyes of the locals. As for the luxury cars in Dubai, there were indeed many, but not as many as one would imagine, especially on the road. The rich in Dubai were rich. They had more than one car. It was just like what Zhang Hai learned in the United States. What kind of car was used for what purpose? In Dubai, sports cars and whatnot were driven at night when they went to play. When they went to work, they mainly used cars. Zhang Hai did see the Lamborghini police car, but there were only a few of them. But even so, most of the police cars here were worth more than 1 million yuan. They were really very luxurious. If they were scratched, how painful would it be? There were also the legendary pets raised by the rich in Dubai. There were indeed tigers, lions, leopards, and so on. Just like Du Feynman, he said that he raised a lot of these beasts. However, these beasts were all brought over from Africa. This was because he had a nature reserve in Africa. He paid for the construction of this nature reserve. Other than him, no one was allowed to enter this place to poach. He would also hire locals to be rangers and give them money and top-notch equipment. Although this was somewhat inappropriate, the local government in Africa was still very welcoming of such tycoons. After all, if he played alone, how many could he kill? Now, not only did he protect these animals, but he also solved the problems of the people and employees. Compared to the disadvantages, the benefits were much more. However, this was Du Feynman. Other people did not have such good benefits. They could only buy pets in pet stores. In fact, it could also be called the black market. Most people raised 2 types of pets: peacocks and camels. Lions, tigers, and the like were really rare. Zhang Hai also inquired about the price of a lion. A male lion was $50,000, a female lion was $30,000, a lion cub was $10,000 to $20,000, and a white lion was $80,000. A tiger's price was about the same as a lion's, and a leopard was even cheaper than them. To be honest, Zhang Hai was quite interested in these beasts. Unfortunately, he could not bring them back even if he bought them here. In the end, he could only sigh. It seemed that he had no fate with these beasts. However, there seemed to be a nest of mountain lions in his manor. These days, he also heard some things about the culture here. The conflict between the locals and the foreigners was quite big. The locals' wages were quite high, and the work intensity was quite low. There was almost no difficulty. However, the foreigners' work intensity was high, and their wages were much lower than the locals. Moreover, there was no guarantee. Even if a local skipped work to play outside or eat outside, as long as he clocked in as usual, he would not be fired. This was the case even if he slept during work. However, if a foreigner was slightly dissatisfied, he would be fired. One did not worry about scarcity, but about uneven distribution. This was the current situation here. As for seeing a doctor and going to school, the locals had the advantage. When the locals went to the public hospital to see a doctor, other than the registration fee and some medical equipment, such as gauze, all the rest of the medicine, surgery fees, and so on were free. They did not have to spend money. Even lunch in the hospital was free. This was the advantage of the locals. However, the locals had money, so they were more willing to spend money to see a doctor at a private hospital. It was the same for going to school. In public schools, the teachers were quite good to the local students. This was because a local in Dubai could marry 4 wives. No one knew which big family he was related to. Moreover, the people in Dubai were quite unreasonable. They helped their relatives to the extreme. If his child did not do well in the exam, it was the teacher's responsibility. If he did not teach well, he could pack up and leave with a call. If his child made trouble, spoke in class, smashed things, and so on, it was the teacher's responsibility. He could pack up and leave with a call. If his child fought in school, it was fine if he won, but if he lost, it was the teacher's responsibility. Why didn't the teacher catch the other child and let his child beat him up? This was the teacher's responsibility, so he could pack up and leave. Therefore, in Dubai, basically only the local teachers dared to teach the local students. The foreign teachers mostly stayed in schools such as foreign languages. They did not dare to have any special thoughts about the local children. They would even take the initiative to help the local children cheat in the exam just to get a good result. However, some children were even too lazy to cheat. The teacher also had to help write the answers and then change the score. This could be said to be the most depressing place in the world as a teacher. These days, wherever Jiang Hai went, he would hear about the conflicts between the locals and foreigners. However, Jiang Hai just smiled. These things had nothing to do with him, and he was not willing to get involved. He believed that Du Feynman and the others knew about these things. Since they knew and still allowed the people to behave like this, they must have their own ideas. To put it simply, their power was given to them by the people of Dubai. If there was chaos, it would originate from the locals of Dubai. If a foreigner did not have a good life in Dubai, he could leave if he did not want to stay. Who would stop him? If he wanted to rebel, then they would have a reason to suppress him. As long as the locals did not bomb the temple, the foreigners had nothing to do with them. It could be said that the foundation of their rule was the locals. There was no such thing as fairness in a bowl of water. However, even so, there were still a large number of foreigners in Dubai. This was because their wages and benefits were much less than the locals in Dubai. However, there was one thing that they could not avoid. Even if the number of foreigners here was much less than the locals here, compared to their lives in their respective countries, it was much better. For example, Xia people. In China, an IT staff in their 30s, even if they were a department manager, could earn $500,000 to $1 million a year. However, for the same position, their income in Dubai could reach $5 million to $10 million. The environment here was better. Although the money spent was more than the locals, it was much less than in China. The education was also much better than in China. Although the environment was hot, it was much better than in China in terms of economy and people's livelihood. Whether it was food, accommodation, transportation, medical care, education, people's livelihood, economy, etc., all aspects were better than in China. Therefore, even if it was unequal, they would still come. This was the reality. The welfare in Europe, except for a few small countries, was not as good as here. Therefore, there was nothing much to say. If it was unequal, then so be it. Even if it was unequal, they would still come to make money. In 3 days, Zhang Hai had gained some understanding of this place. He also bought a lot of things. Basically, they were all branded bags and clothes. There was also a lot of gold. He sent most of these things back to Winthrop. Zhang Tai kept some gifts with him because he would give them to Qili, Feng Yunchun, Ai Xiaoxi, Qili's mother, Bernice, Xiaoya, Delina, and Marian when he returned to China. Zhang Tai was going to give some gifts to Qili, Feng Yunchun, Ai Xiaoxi, Qili's mother, Bernice, Xiaoya, Delina, and Marian. As for Azalina, she was in a favorable position. Zhang Hai bought several sets of clothes for her, but she sent them back to Winthrop. The prices of luxury goods here were indeed much cheaper than those in New York. 3 days passed in a flash. On the 5th morning of Zhang Hai's arrival in Dubai, Du Feimin, who had disappeared for 3 days, appeared again. This time, he still brought a fleet of 12 cars, but they were no longer the Rolls-Royce used by the rich. Instead, they were all SUVs. There were 11 out-of-print Hummer H2S, which were known as the best SUVs in the world. It was not easy to see so many of them now. In addition, there was also a car that Zhang Hai was very familiar with, the Battle Shield. You also got this car? Touching the door of the car, Zhang Hai said to Du Feimin with some nostalgia. I saw that you looked good, so I got one after I came back. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin said with a smile. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai curled his lips. Seeing that he drove well, he got one. Sigh. When can I be so good? After seeing the motorcade, Zhang Hai and the others didn't speak much nonsense because the place they were going to was quite far. After getting in the car, the motorcade drove out of Dubai's city limits and headed towards the desert. Chapter 660. What the F*** CK. Zhang Hai shouted in surprise as he grabbed the upper left handle. To be honest, even in winter, the desert was not a fun place. The wind would blow sand all over one's face, and the temperature was particularly hot. Therefore, as soon as they entered the desert, they closed the windows. It was somewhat suffocating, but fortunately, there was air conditioning and ventilation, which was not bad. But another point was that there was no road in the desert. If they wanted to walk, they had to pass through the sand dunes. To be honest, it was too much of a scam. The degree of shaking was actually no less than riding a roller coaster, and the most important thing was that this thing did not give them any sense of security. Zhang Hai had just crashed into a tree a few days ago, and now he felt that the car would flip over at any time. It was really too much of a scam. Don't worry, there's no need to make a fuss. This is actually just an appetizer. Hearing Zhang Hai's shouting, Du Feimin couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, compared to Zhang Hai's terrain, he was already used to it and sat very steadily. After driving for about half an hour, the car slowly stopped. As soon as the car stopped, Zhang Hai directly pushed open the door and walked out. He lay on the ground and panted heavily. The road here was too much of a scam. Was this a joke? How could it be so fierce? Looking at Zhang Hai lying on the ground, Du Feimin also walked out and said with a smile, Hey, you're really strange. I thought I wouldn't be able to stand on the ground alive, but where is your ranch? Why can't I see it? After lying on the ground for about 2 minutes, Zhang Hai recovered, but after standing up and looking around, he found that he was still surrounded by a desert. Is Du Feimin playing with me? What the hell is this? Where's the ranch? The ranch is in the middle of the desert. In fact, to be honest, we are still at the edge of the desert. There are still 2 hours of driving. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin said with a smile. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai's face turned dark. 2 hours? Why did you stop the car now? Although his face was particularly dark, Zhang Hai still had to ask. What kind of method was this? We're stopping now to let the air out of the tires. Actually, we haven't entered the desert yet. We still have to walk on the road ahead. It's much more interesting than the front. If the air in the tires is too full, it will be difficult to maintain balance. You have to let some air out to make the tires softer so that it's easier to move forward. Hearing Zhang Hai's doubts, Du Feimin also shared some knowledge with him. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai's face dripped with cold sweat. He had no other thoughts. Are you kidding me? This is just an appetizer? The real main course was yet to come. Hearing what he said, Zhang Hai swore in his heart that he would not come here if he had nothing to do. Well, even if he had something to do, he would not come here. The city of Dubai was quite fun, but this place was too deceptive. Why didn't you come here by helicopter? Looking at Zhang Hai's ashen face, Azalina, who was not affected, could not help but walk over and pat his back. She knew that her boss was frightened by this statement. Then, she looked at Du Feynman and said doubtfully, "It's not that I don't want to, but it's because in the desert, it's just like in the sea. There might be a storm at any time, and helicopters can't fly high. If we're unlucky and encounter a storm, then we're dead. There's no airport on the ranch, so there's no way to land, so we can only drive here." Hearing Azalina's words, Du Feynman spread his hands and explained to Zhang Hai. However, Zhang Hai did not know how much of this was true. But since they were already here, Zhang Hai could not go back directly. So, after resting for a while, he got on the car again and experienced the feeling of this box-type roller coaster. Fortunately, this driver was indeed the best driver. Although the journey was very thrilling, and some slopes were even more than 70 degrees, the car did not stop. But the car didn't overturn, and it drove very steadily. Following the car, Zhang Hai and the others jumped over sand mountains and seas. About 2 hours later, when the car stopped again, Zhang Hai climbed out of the car. Now, he didn't vomit, which was quite difficult. After retching for a long time, Zhang Hai did not care about how hot the sand on the ground was. He directly lay on the ground and did not want to get up again. Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Du Feynman sat in the car, amused. He knew that Zhang Hai would not be able to recover for a while, so he would not get out of the car and be exposed to the sun now. After about 10 minutes, Zhang Hai slowly got up from the ground. Seeing Zhang Hai get up, Du Feynman also got out of the car and took the initiative to walk in front of Zhang Hai. He patted his back and brushed off the sand on it. "I won't come again in the future. No matter what you say, I won't come again." Zhang Hai waved his hand and looked at Du Feynman firmly. "You're too weak. Actually, you'll get used to it after a while." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman smiled and said to him. After the two chatted for a while, Zhang Hai also looked into the distance. This time, he saw a ranch in the distance. Looking at this ranch, even Zhang Hai had to admit that the Dubai royal family was indeed rich. At this time, in Zhang Hai's eyes, their ranch should be a giant oasis, covering an area of about hundreds of thousands of acres. Outside the green U, there was a layer of electrified wall. This was the same as Zhang Hai's manor. Behind the wall, there were several rows of huge trees used to block the wind and sand. Inside the trees, there was a green grassland. "Wow, you're really generous." Looking at the endless ranch in front of him, Zhang Hai was honestly shocked. Worthy of the legendary Dubai royal family, they were indeed more generous than Zhang Hai. This place was originally a small oasis, with a very rich underground water source. "Since I came back from your place, I used the power of the whole country to expand this oasis. The trees outside are the most effective in blocking the wind and sand. The outermost layer is a palm tree, below it is a date palm tree, and the inner layer is a date palm tree. The fruit of this kind of tree tastes pretty good." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman also introduced the oasis. "The land we're stepping on is all flown in from the most fertile Australia. It's covered with the sea mud of the Persian Gulf, and the grass planted on it is emperor bamboo grass. I can say that everything is prepared according to the best pasture, but the most important thing is still your grass." Looking at Zhang Hai, Du Feynman said while walking. It was obvious that he really valued this project. Zhang Hai also glanced at the so-called emperor bamboo grass. There was no emperor bamboo grass in Zhang Hai's manor, but it did not prevent him from hearing about this grass. Emperor bamboo grass, known as the royal family of the pasture, was the strongest pasture. It was a cross between elephant grass and North American wolf's tail grass. In the ranch, this grass was recognized as the best pasture in the world. It grew quickly, was rich in nutrients, and had good effects. However, Zhang Hai's manor did not have it because this grass was not suitable for Winthrop. The living habits of this kind of pasture were more deceptive. It was only suitable for tropical and subtropical planting. The sun required more than 1,000 hours of sunshine per year. The altitude range was okay, and it could be planted at 200-1500 meters. The annual average temperature was above 15 degrees, and the precipitation was above 1,000 millimeters. However, this could be done by watering. The annual frost-free period was about 250 days. This alone was impossible for Zhang Hai's manor. The soil had to be very fertile, but it also had to be very fertile sandy soil. If all the above requirements were met, about 25 stalks could be distributed in a year. In fact, to be honest, many families had made a fortune by raising this grass. For example, Du Feimin's ranch was basically planted with this grass. It had to be admitted that this was the style of a nouveau riche. Of course, it was impossible to only plant one type of grass in a ranch, just like how people could not only eat one type of vegetable. This type of grass was the main pasture. In addition, there were many other types of pasture such as ryegrass, sweet elephant grass, corn grass, alfalfa grass, and so on. In terms of grass alone, the pasture in Du Feimin's ranch was probably much better than the pasture in Zhang Hai's manor. Of course, this referred to the time before Zhang Hai's arrival. Now, the pasture in Zhang Hai's manor can be regarded as the best in the world. Seeing that Zhang Hai was very satisfied with his ranch, Du Feimin could not help but laugh. "Come, look at the cattle I prepared." They were not short of money. He also understood the principle that high investment equaled high income. As long as they could make money, they did not mind investing more. After looking at the ranch, grass, and trees, Zhang Hai followed Du Feimin to look at their cattle. However, after looking at them, Zhang Hai could not help but secretly scold him for being a prodigal. Zhang Hai was very confident in his pasture. In his opinion, the cattle that Du Feimin bought were Angus cattle and the like. Just these cattle alone, Zhang Hai was confident that he could use his pasture to raise about 5% of 5A grade beef. However, Du Feimin obviously did not think so. Therefore, the cattle he bought were really not ordinary cattle. Basically, Zhang Hai looked around. Most of the cattle here were Zymenthal and Charolais. According to the standard, these two cattle breeds were better than Angus cattle. Their crossbreeds were already considered the top cattle breeds in the country. In the country, the best cattle in the country were Lucy cattle. However, whether it was Charolais cattle or Zymenthal cattle, their crossbreeds in the country were 1.5 times more profitable than Lucy cattle in the country. Moreover, the cattle that Du Feimin bought were all purebred. Whether it was in terms of meat production, meat output, or quality, they were all better than Angus cattle, let alone domestic cattle. In addition to these cattle, Du Feimin also raised a batch of Japanese cattle. In addition, there were many camels and sheep here. It was obvious that Du Feimin really cared about this place. Looking at these animals in front of him, Zhang Hai could not help but nod to himself. He was no longer the Xiao Bai from a year ago. Now he had his own opinions. Du Feimin's place was not his territory. Because he was the royal family of Dubai, occupying an oasis might not cost him much money. However, the cost of these cattle and sheep alone was probably not lower than the total price of his own manor. In other words, just buying these cattle and sheep alone might cost him more than $300 million. This was really not an ordinary amount of money. As he followed Du Feimin, he looked around and observed the situation of the ranch. To be honest, Zhang Hai did not have much to say, because the layout of this ranch was much better than his own manor. Whether it was the supporting facilities, the density of the guards, the quality of the grass, and so on, Zhang Hai could not even say a word. Compared to this ranch, Zhang Hai's ranch was much more unprofessional. After all, Zhang Hai himself came from an unorthodox background. Robbins Garcia and the others were not well-bred cowboys, so they did not know much about these things, let alone teach Zhang Hai. Therefore, after walking around here, Zhang Hai did not have much to say. "Your place is very good. I don't have any opinions. When are you going to come to my place to gather grass?" After looking around and confirming that there was no room for him to say anything, Zhang Hai said to Du Feimin, because he really did not know what to say. As soon as possible. When is it convenient for you? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin smiled. In fact, he invited Zhang Hai here mainly to let Zhang Hai see if his ranch and Zhang Hai's grass were compatible. If there was any conflict, it would be troublesome. In fact, he was thinking too much. Zhang Hai's grass was compatible with everything. If a person ate it, there would only be benefits, not to mention cows. Then let's do it at the beginning of March. At that time, the snow in Winthrop will melt, and it will be easier to gather grass. After I come to your place, I will have to go back to Huaxia. It may take more than a month before I go back. At the beginning of March, I will be back. At that time, you can come to gather grass. He calculated the time in his heart. The beginning of March was a good time. At that time, the grass in his manor that was tied up but not eaten by the cows could be sold to Du Feimin. At that time, he should also start fishing. Thinking about it, it was only during this period that he was relatively free. After he started fishing and the beginning of spring, he might be busy for a period of time again. I see. No problem. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feimin thought for a moment. This was acceptable. It would only take more than a month. He could try it himself. Without Zhang Hai's grass, he could raise cows very well. Your Highness Du Feimin, just as Zhang Hai and Du Feimin were about to settle this matter, a voice suddenly came from afar. Hearing this voice, Zhang Hai and Du Feimin both looked over. They only saw that at this time, in the distance, a yellow man was being stopped by Du Feimin's bodyguard, and he was constantly shouting towards Du Feimin. Seeing this person, Du Feimin's face smiled. Then he waved to the bodyguard. The bodyguard saw that his master had spoken, so he let go of his hand, allowing the yellow man to quickly run over. Chapter 661. Your Highness. After the middle-aged man ran over, he glanced at Zhang Hai in front of him, but he did not greet him. Instead, Zhang Hai felt a trace of hostility from him, which made Zhang Hai somewhat puzzled. It seemed that he did not know this yellow-skinned man. After the yellow-skinned man glanced at Zhang Hai, he respectfully looked at Du Feimin and said with a serious face, while stroking his chest, "Oh, Mr. Akita, may I know why you are looking for me?" Looking at the yellow-skinned man in front of him, Du Feimin said with a smile. Hearing him call this person's name, Zhang Hai also knew that this guy should be a Japanese. No wonder Zhang Hai felt a little unhappy when he saw him, but now that he was in Du Feimin's territory, Zhang Hai could not say much. After all, Du Feimin was different from him. He was the royal family of Dubai. Although he had some personal relations with him, it was impossible for him to overlook public affairs for personal reasons. Your Highness is too polite. Just call me Akita. I came here because I heard that His Highness Du Feimin invited a guest, so I came to have a look and discuss the situation of cattle raising. The guy called Akita said, while looking at Zhang Hai. From his eyes, it was not difficult for Zhang Hai to see that he was still very hostile to him, and the source of this hostility might be this ranch. I'm Akita Mango, the director of the Foreign Trade Bureau of Japan's Akita Corporation. I'm also one of the designers and builders of this ranch. I heard that Mr. Jiang is a kindred spirit, so I'd like to come and ask for advice. After saying that, Akita did not care about Du Feimin's ugly face and looked at Zhang Hai with a serious face. At the same time, he bowed to Zhang Hai, which was also the etiquette of Japan. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai touched his nose. This guy must be crazy. Forget about asking for advice, because I don't know anything about ranching. I don't know anything about farming from management to breeding. Well, maybe Zhang Hai didn't have any specialization. Other than spiritual energy, he didn't have any other specialties, therefore, instead of being ridiculed for a while, it was better to tell the truth first. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, not only was Akita Makoto stunned for a moment, but even Du Feimin was stunned for a moment. Although Akita Makoto seemed to be brainless, his IQ was not low. Although Akita Corporation was not as powerful as Yasui or Mitsubishi in Japan, Akita Corporation was not as flashy in Japan. But in fact, this conglomerate was quite a capital group. They were Japan's #1 livestock export company. Otherwise, they would not be able to get in touch with Du Femin. Japan's livestock industry was very famous around the world. In the beginning, Japan's animal husbandry wasn't very famous. After all, Japan's territory was only so small. Other than the places where people lived, the food grown on the island was really only enough to prevent the people from starving to death. Later, Japan changed its policy. They no longer grew a large amount of food, vegetables, and fruits in Japan. They changed to high-end sales. They only raised the best cattle and planted the best rice. They used the price difference to gain a foothold in the international farmers' market. As for the food that ordinary people ate, it was all imported from Huaxia. This was because imported from Huaxia was much cheaper than in their own country. In fact, not only Japan but South Korea was also the same. At this time, most of the vegetables and fruits in Japan and South Korea were imported from Huaxia's Lu province. Of course, their domestic requirements were very high. They couldn't be too big, too small, or ugly. Therefore, the price was much more expensive than those sold in China. Many people specialized in this business. Akita Corporation was one of the leaders in Japan's livestock industry. Akita Makoto could be considered as the family head of Akita Corporation. However, it was not a very important family head. Although his surname was Akita, he did not have shares or inheritance rights. This time, he was the one who proposed to be on good terms with Du Femin. Even those Wagyu cattle were brought over by him. He already knew about the relationship between Du Femin and Zhang Hai, but he believed that he would definitely be more favored by Du Femin than Zhang Hai, this lucky upstart. After all, he was a professional. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was just a lucky upstart, nothing more. He didn't know what kind of black technology he used, or what kind of shameless technology. Zhang Hai's cattle were sold at a high price, and even beat a Japanese animal husbandry company. But Akita was not the same as the company he defeated. They were the best company in Japan. Whether it was the company or the individual, he did not think that he would lose to Zhang Hai. So don't look at how he came here so rashly. In fact, he had thought it through carefully. He wanted to defeat Zhang Hai at his proudest moment, expose the fact that he was a liar, and then make friends with Du Femin. This way, not only would his company benefit, but his country would also benefit. He could even become a hero. When he thought of this, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. But what he didn't expect was that Zhang Hai would actually admit it. He wanted to compete with Zhang Hai to prove that Zhang Hai was a liar. But now, Zhang Hai directly said that he didn't know anything about business or farming. He was a liar, a dignified liar. This really made him speechless. You don't know anything about farming. What are you doing here? Seeing that Zhang Hai didn't play by the rules, Akita Masao almost couldn't breathe. He coughed, looked at Zhang Hai, and said with a serious face, "I'm here to play. Du Femin is my friend." But after listening to his words, Zhang Hai looked at him with even more confusion. It was as if he was looking at a fool. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Akita Masao really didn't know what to say. He felt that his face was burning hot because he didn't know what to say. This was like a master inviting his friend to play in the house, but the servant in the house had to drag the guest to compete with him to see who could wipe the table clean. Thinking of this, Akita Masao couldn't help but open his mouth, then looked at Du Femin. "Mr. Akita, if there's nothing else, you can go and rest. My friend and I still have to look around." Du Femin couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at his blindfolded eyes. "This guy is trying to embarrass me, right? So arrogant. I'm really sorry, I was rude." Hearing Du Femin's words, Akita Masao was completely confused. Although Du Femin didn't say anything too harsh, he could hear that this guy was a little unhappy, so he immediately bent down and bowed to Du Femin and Zhang Hai, then quickly left. He had to go back and think about what was going on with Zhang Hai. Seeing Akita Masao leave, Zhang Hai looked at Du Femin and said somewhat speechlessly, "Your manor was built by the Japanese? I know that you Huaxia people don't like the Japanese, so I originally wanted to find an American company or an Australian company to build this ranch. Although Huaxia's company is cheap, they don't have much experience in this area, but my cousin found them. He is the chief, so he can do whatever he wants." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman shrugged. He thought that Zhang Hai was angry. However, when Zhang Hai heard his words, he shook his head. He didn't mind these things because he knew that there was no top-notch ranch in the country. In China, most people didn't know that beef still had to be graded. Beef still had to be divided into portions. The difference between lean meat, eye meat, and cucumber strips was really not known by many people. In China, it was still stuck at the time of how much a cow was worth, and it wasn't divided according to grade. Therefore, it was inevitable that Du Feynman didn't look for Chinese people to build it. If it was Zhang Hai, he also wouldn't look for Chinese people to build it. In this aspect, the Japanese did have an advantage. Whether you admit it or not, the Japanese cattle was the best breed in the world. This was undeniable. The top breed in the country was the Lucy yellow cattle, but in the world, this breed was only at the bottom of the second class. It was indeed not a good breed, and in addition to the Japanese, there were many other countries that the Chinese hated. Britain, France, the United States, Germany, Russia, Japan, Italy, Austria, Prussia, and the Netherlands all invaded Huaxia, and the Huaxia people didn't like them. In addition, in recent years, the South Asian countries, South Korea and India, these countries, Huaxia didn't like any of them. It can be said that according to the world map, except for North Korea and some West Asian countries, Huaxia was the enemy of the whole world. If Zhang Hai was really like an angry youth, why would he go to the United States? He would have done construction for the sake of social justice. Okay, I don't care about these things. We are friends, and I don't have shares in your ranch. How much do you want for the first batch of fodder? I'll call them back and let them prepare earlier. Waving his hand, Zhang Hai really didn't care about these small things. Looking at Du Feynman, he said to him. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Du Feynman thought for a moment. He couldn't bet all his treasures on Zhang Hai. Now, in this ranch, according to his initial request, there were a total of 1.2 million cattle, including 500,000 Charolais cattle, 500,000 Ximental cattle, 150,000 Japanese cattle, 30,000 dairy cows, and 20,000 other mixed cattle, 800,000 sheep, 50,000 alpacas, and some other things. If these guys all ate Zhang Hai's fodder, Zhang Hai might not be able to supply them. After all, it was still winter. Moreover, Du Feynman didn't want to use all of them, so in the end, he decided to pick out 50,000 cattle to eat the fodder that Zhang Hai sent over. 50,000 cattle, Zhang Hai could also bear it. He could also do an experiment first. It was quite convenient. Zhang Hai was a very casual person. Sometimes business deals were settled just like that. After discussing the quantity of the first batch of fodder, Zhang Hai and the others continued to stroll around. They had to admit that strolling around the grassland in the desert was indeed a very enjoyable thing. After strolling around for a while, they returned to the residential area. There, Du Feynman specially held a party to welcome Zhang Hai. At the party, Zhang Hai saw Akita Masaaki for the second time, but this guy's hostility was deeper. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was an out-and-out bastard. On one hand, Zhang Hai told him that he didn't know how to manage or raise livestock, but on the other hand, he sold so much fodder to Du Feynman. It was the first time he knew that fodder was so valuable. Zhang Hai's fodder was about to be sold for the price of an ordinary cow. In his opinion, Zhang Hai was a liar who was fooling him. It was really too hateful, but there was no other way. Du Feynman trusted this liar, and he didn't know why it was like this. If he knew that Du Feynman and Zhang Hai actually had a billion-dollar jewelry and antiques business, perhaps he wouldn't think so. How much were those things? How much were those things worth? Although money was just a number for the rich, who didn't want this number to be higher? It could be said that the cooperation between Zhang Hai and Du Feynman was only the smallest one. A billion-dollar business was already done. What was a billion-dollar business? At least, Du Feynman believed in Zhang Hai very much. Regarding Akita Masaaki's hostility, Zhang Hai felt helpless and a little amused. This guy really took him seriously. But it was still the same sentence. After all, This was Du Feimin's territory. Jiang Hai couldn't say anything. However, if this guy dared to bark, then Jiang Hai didn't mind letting him have a taste of being beaten. When a dog barked at you, you really couldn't call it back, but you could hit it back. As for the severity of the beating, it would depend on his mood. If the beating was light, he would treat it as a lesson. If the beating was heavy and killed, then he would treat it as if he deserved it. After making dog meat hot pot, it would taste pretty good. After cutting a piece of authentic Arabian barbecue meat in front of him, Jiang Hai put it into his mouth and laughed. It seemed that he hadn't eaten dog meat for a while. Naturally, Jiang Hai wasn't a dog lover. He had a dog, so he didn't feel guilty about eating dog meat. But in the United States, no one ate dog meat. Usually, when he went back, no one would go to Zhongluo to eat dog meat. Now, dog meat restaurants were rare. But after a while, when he returned to Bing City, he could go there to eat dog meat. Even gods couldn't stand still. Boss, what are you thinking about? Why are you so happy? Looking at Jiang Hai eating meat and smiling happily, Azalina, who was sitting next to him, couldn't help but look at him strangely. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also reacted. Chapter 662. Oh, it's nothing. Azalina, have you eaten dog meat before? Jiang Hai smiled and shook his head, indicating that he was fine, and then said to Azalina. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina recalled her childhood. I ate it when I was young. At that time, we trained all day, but the nutritious meals we ate tasted terrible. Then I and a few of my sisters stole the dog that the instructor often let out to bite us. We roasted it and ate it. To be honest, the taste was not very good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina couldn't help but be immersed in her memories. She did not tell Jiang Hai about how hard it was when she was young. However, Jiang Hai has seen some special agent movies and the like. It's not an exaggeration to say that the training is ***********. Soviet Russia has this tradition since a long time ago. This fighting nation is ruthless to the enemy and even more ruthless to themselves. So needless to say, Jiang Hai also knows what she went through when she was young, but at this time, he can't say anything to comfort her because it will make him seem hypocritical. Jiang Hai is not a hypocritical person, so although his heart skipped a beat, there is no other expression on his face. That's because you didn't eat good food. When we return to Bing City, I will take you to eat good food. Patting Azalina's shoulder, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also laughed. But at this time, Jiang Hai's phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone and looked at it. It was an unfamiliar number. It can be said that it was the first time he saw it. This made Jiang Hai feel a little strange, but this ringtone lasted for a long time, which made Jiang Hai a little confused. After thinking for a while, he picked it up. What if it was someone he knew using someone else's phone? Hello? Hello. After picking up the phone, Jiang Hai said to the other side of the phone, Hello, brother? Where are you? After picking up the phone, a woman's voice came from the other side of the phone, but her way of calling made Jiang Hai confused. Brother? When did I have a younger sister? And this voice sounds a little unfamiliar. Did you call the wrong number? After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to explain. Aren't you Jiang Hai? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the woman on the other side of the phone said with some doubts. Hearing this woman call his name, Jiang Hai can't help but be a little dumbfounded. He didn't recognize who this person is. Yes, you are? Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. It's me, you. Hearing that Jiang Hai really couldn't recognize who she was, the female voice on the other side of the phone couldn't help but speak with some exasperation. You, hearing these two words, Jiang Hai was a little confused for a while, and a trace of memory was recalled. Jiang Hai's mother's surname is He. When his mother was still alive, he also had a group of relatives, but after his mother passed away, Jiang Hai didn't have any contact with these relatives, and these relatives naturally didn't want to have any contact with him. Jiang Hai has 3 uncles and 1 aunt. This family has 5 daughters in total. It may be the old tradition of the Northeast that values boys over girls, but Jiang Hai is a nephew, So since he was a child, his uncles and aunts were not very good to Jiang Hai. When they grew up, they didn't have any contact. This Hiyu is the youngest daughter of Jiang Hai's uncle. She also has an elder sister, who is the same age as Jiang Hai and a few months older. Her name is Hifeng. The second uncle's daughter is Hirue, the youngest uncle's daughter is Hiyu, and the eldest aunt's daughter is Wenjing. But this family, to be honest, is a bit snobbish. They originally didn't like Jiang Hai, not to mention after Jiang Hai's mother died. They disliked Jiang Hai even more. Of course, you can't expect others to be good to you. So Jiang Hai never complained about them. If they didn't want to be relatives, then they would be strangers. So no matter when Jiang Hai was good or bad, he never went to these relatives' houses. He just treated them as if they didn't exist. And they seemed to want this, but now they suddenly called Jiang Hai, which made Jiang Hai a little surprised. Oh, what's the matter? Although Jiang Hai doesn't want to acknowledge these relatives, he still has to ask, so he said to Hiyu, "It's like this. On the 27th of next month, it's my dad's 60th birthday party. Remember to come early." Hearing that Jiang Hai remembered her, Hiyu obviously didn't want to talk to this cousin, who doesn't remember her anymore. She directly said to Jiang Hai, "Oh, I might not have time. I'm not in Bing City now." Hearing what Hiyu said, Jiang Hai told the truth. He really doesn't want to go. Not in Bing City. Where did you go? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Hiyu was also stunned for a moment and asked curiously, "I'm mainly in the United States now, but now I'm in Dubai." There is nothing to hide, so Jiang Hai said directly, "Hey, brother, I used to know that you were poor, but I didn't expect you to learn how to lie. The United States? Dubai? Haha, it's so funny." But after hearing the truth from Jiang Hai, Hiyu on the other side was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed. Hearing Hiyu's words and laughter, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Then the fire in his heart suddenly flared up, but it was extinguished in an instant. It was useless to talk to these people, it was indeed meaningless. Therefore, he just smiled. "Brother, if you don't want to come, just say it. We won't laugh at you for not having enough money to give a red packet. You don't have to find such a reason." Maybe she had enough of laughing, Hiyu on the other side said to Jiang Hai. The strong disdain in her words kept refreshing Jiang Hai's lowest point. "Well, actually, you are right. I just don't want to go. Tell uncle and wish him a happy birthday." "Okay, I still have something to do here, so I'll hang up first." Shaking his head, Jiang Hai ignored the mocking laughter on the phone, said directly, and hung up the phone. After hanging up the phone, Jiang Hai quickly adjusted his mood and continued to eat. At this time in Bing City, in a warm room, a family was talking and laughing. They looked at Hiyu, who walked in with a gloomy face. "How is it? Where is Xiao Hai? If he is at home, let him come over and drink now." An old man sitting in the middle said, "Well, it's not easy to define age now. 60 years old, you can say that you are an old man. You can also say that you are a middle-aged man. Here, you can say that you are an old man." This man is Jiang Hai's uncle, He Weihua. Looking at his daughter, who came in, He Weihua's face was full of smiles as he said, "Sai, that eldest nephew of yours has no intention of coming here for a meal. He is doing well now. He is in the US and Dubai." Hearing her father's words, Hiyu said with a sour face. Hearing what she said, the atmosphere in the room can't help but become a little awkward. "Where did he go? Abroad?" Hearing what his daughter said, He Weihua asked with some doubts. "Yes, he said that he doesn't live in Bing City now. He lives in the United States and is now in Dubai. I haven't seen your nephew for 3 years, and he has learned nothing but bragging. We don't know his family situation. What's the point of bragging to us?" Looking at He Weihua in front of her, Hiyu sat down and said with a sour face. In her opinion, Jiang Hai was bragging. "Okay, don't be angry. No matter what he said is true or not, when we get married, let's go to these 2 places. Do you want to go to Dubai or the United States?" Looking at Hiyu's expression, a man sitting next to her couldn't help but laugh and say. This man looked to be in his 30s. His clothes were not bad, but he exuded a wretched aura. This man is called Xiangming. He is Hiyu's boyfriend, but he is not a good person. Hee-yu did not go to university. She was a kindergarten teacher in high school. After graduation, her family used their connections to get her into a kindergarten. She is 6 years younger than Jong-hai, 22 years old this year. Xiangming is the parent of her student. He is 34 years old this year, older than her. He is a businessman and has some money. Then, he hooked up with Hee-yu. But Hee-yu has to admit that Hee-yu has some tricks up her sleeves. She took away Xiangming's original wife, and they divorced. Now Xiangming is devoted to Hee-yu, although Hee-yu's parents are not willing to do this. But children are like this, and they can't do anything about it. Fortunately, Xiangming is rich, and Jong-hai's uncle's family is also very observant, so they turn a blind eye to it. As for Hee-yu, she has an elder sister, Hee-seah. Her husband is also a businessman. Hee-seah is 8 years older than Hee-yu. Although she has a lot of bad habits, at least she has never had a child before and has never been married. I want to go to these two places. Hearing Xiangming's words, Hee-yu here said with a smile, Okay, whatever you want. Hearing Hee-yu's words, Xiangming also responded with a smile. Facing this girlfriend of his who is younger than him, Xiangming treasured her a lot. However, in the eyes of others, this kind of behavior was somewhat unsuitable for them. Or, I will call Jong-hai again. Look at my little sister. She didn't say anything on the phone just now. Looking at Hee-yu and Xiangming in front of her, Hee-seah hesitated and said to her father, Hee-wei-hua. Okay, you go and call another one. Looking at Hee-yu and Xiangming, Hee-wei-hua sighed and said to Hee-seah. Then Hee-seah picked up her phone and went to the next room to call Jong-hai. The phone was picked up not long after it rang. Hello? Who is it? At this time, Jong-hai, who was in Dubai, was also drunk. He just wanted to have a good meal. Why were there so many unmarked phone calls today? Can't you let me have a good meal? The phone call just now made his mood bad. He hoped that this one would be better. It's me, Hee-seah. You just said that you went abroad? Hearing Jong-hai's voice, Hee-seah's voice also came from the other side of the phone. After hearing that it was Hee-seah, Jong-hai was a little silent. Because Hee-seah and Jong-hai were only a few months apart, it could be said that the two grew up together. Before Jong-hai was 17 or 18 years old, which was 10 years ago, the relationship between the two was quite good. But since Hee-seah graduated from high school and started to work, the two gradually lost contact. However, after all, they grew up together. She and Jong-hai had a good relationship. When Jong-hai's mother passed away, she didn't take any money. Of course, she didn't have much money, but she still helped a lot. In Jong-hai's heart, there was still a trace of affection for this sister. At least when he needed help. She didn't pay, but she did put in effort. Oh, it's Sister Seah. Yes, I left last year. I went to Boston in the US. I opened a manor there, and raised cows and fish. I have to find something for myself to do. Hearing Hee-seah's voice, Jong-hai's attitude became better. Oh, there? That's good. You are not young anymore. You should have something to do. It's still the same thing. My father's 60th birthday is on the 27th of next month. Will you be in Bing City or the US? I heard that you are in Dubai. When are you going to leave? Are you not coming back for the new year? Hearing what Jong-hai said, Hee-seah did not question Jong-hai. Instead, she continued to talk to Jong-hai. In fact, she believed a little now. But she only believed that Jong-hai had gone to the US. As for what he was going to do there, it was another story. This was because it was not hard to find out about this. I am in Dubai now. I have a friend who opened a ranch here and raised some cows. I am here to help out, and will not be staying for a few days. I should be going back during the new year. But to be honest, I don't really want to go. After the new year, I need to pick a date to move my parents' graves. I don't know if there will be any conflicts at that time. Listening to Hee-seah's voice, Jong-hai thought for a moment and told her about his arrangement. To be honest, he didn't want to go. This was actually quite an excuse, but Hee-seah seemed to want Jong-hai to come. And is moving her parents' graves? Let me know when you have time. I will go and help. Aunt treated me well in the past. I cannot miss this opportunity. However, after hearing Jong-hai's arrangement, He Xia suddenly said. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai wanted to refuse, but he couldn't say it out loud. This matter was indeed better if there were more people, and it was more lively. Thinking of his mother, who was really good to He Xia in the past, he hesitated for a moment. Zhang Hai also agreed. But thinking about it, when his parents moved their graves, when her father celebrated his birthday, it seemed that he really couldn't avoid it. Thinking about it gave him a headache, to be honest. Zhang Hai did not want to interact with his relatives. But sometimes he had to interact with them. It was really troublesome. Chapter 663. What's wrong? Seeing Zhang Hai remain silent after hanging up the phone, Azalina looked at Zhang Hai and asked curiously. Scratching his head, Zhang Hai looked at Azalina, smiled helplessly, and said to her, Nothing, I just feel that it might be a little troublesome. Troublesome? Do you need me to deal with it? Hearing Zhang Hai say Chibwa in English, forget about the pronunciation, anyway, Azalina understood. That was the most important thing. Hearing Zhang Hai say that there was trouble, she made a throat-slitting gesture. No, you're too cruel. I'm talking about my family. I thought I wouldn't have any interaction with them anymore, but I didn't expect there to be something else. Looking at her, Zhang Hai couldn't help but wave his hand immediately. What a joke. He was just going to attend a birthday banquet. He didn't need to kill anyone. Oh, I see. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Azalina chose to shut her mouth. Since he didn't need her, it had nothing to do with her. Zhang Hai sat helplessly on the bench at this time. He really didn't know how to face his relatives. Speaking of which, Zhang Hai was not afraid of you being unreasonable, not afraid of you being tough, and not afraid of you flattering him with ulterior motives. If you were unreasonable to him, he would be even more unreasonable than you. If you were tough to him, he would be even tougher than you. If you flattered him, he wouldn't care. He was afraid that others would be nice to him. He was like this. Maybe it was because he lacked love in the past. If you gave him a drop of water, he would repay it with a gushing spring. For example, when He called at the beginning, Zhang Hai could completely tell her, I don't want to go, I'll hang up on you. But facing He Xia, he really couldn't say that. Putting himself in He Xia's shoes, he was a person who lacked love. I hope there won't be any complications this time. Rubbing his temples, Zhang Hai sighed and muttered in a low voice. While he was troubled by this matter, Akita Mako, who was opposite him, was staring at him. It was said that people of the same trade were enemies. This was not an exaggeration at all. Although Zhang Hai had never thought that he was in the same trade as Akita Shingo, his perspective was much higher than his. He did not mean to oppose this guy, but this guy did not think so. Originally, after Zhang Hai denied that he was in this line of work, his hostility towards Zhang Hai had decreased a lot. However, after he learned that Zhang Hai had sold another batch of grass to Du Feimin, in his eyes, this Zhang Hai was a shameful villain. He had 1,000,000% confidence in the Akita Corporation. If Zhang Hai came to compete openly, then they would have nothing to say. It was not shameful to lose. Perhaps the people of Japan were very shameless, but they could still afford to lose to Zhang Hai, a person from the United States. However, Zhang Hai's move was a little embarrassing. No, it was not just a little embarrassing, it was quite embarrassing. Akita-kun, this Zhang Hai is so shameless. Why don't we expose him and let His Highness Du Feimin put us in an even more important position? Seeing that Akita Shingo had been staring at Zhang Hai, another Japanese whispered beside him. No, Ino-kun, it's useless even if we go and talk about it. Because we don't know what he said to His Highness Du Feimin. His Highness Du Feimin trusts him very much. If we just talk about it without any evidence, it's very difficult to shake his position in His Highness Du Feimin's heart. Therefore, we have to think of some other methods. Akita Jinwoo whispered as he glanced at Ino-kun beside him and drank his sake. All is fair in war. This person also taught you a lesson. This guy can make His Highness Du Feimin trust him so much with just his mouth. He should have learned Hua Xia's way of making alliances. I heard that he was also involved in the high-speed railway project that Hua Xia opened here last time. This young man should not be underestimated. At this time, an old Japanese man sitting in the back had a flash of light in his eyes, but it disappeared soon after. Then he slowly spoke as if he didn't care at all. Hearing his words, Akita Shingo and Ino Koen, who were sitting in front, couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai. They just thought that this guy was a liar, but they didn't expect that this guy was not an ordinary liar. If Jiang Hai knew what they were thinking, he would probably be confused. They had to admit that sometimes people were most concerned about being smart. They had made a total of 3 mistakes. First, Jiang Hai really wasn't playing any tricks, because he really didn't know how to manage and breed. He just directly used the best 5A grade beef as a stepping stone. Breeding was Robbins Garcia's business. When Jiang Hai was bored, he just put some spiritual energy in the water and watered the ground. That was all. Second, Jiang Hai didn't know how to make alliances. They were treating him as Su Qin and Zhang Yi. What a joke. Although Jiang Hai's current brain development was extremely high, to be honest, he didn't use it. For example, he used 2% of his brain in the past and developed 5%. Now it was 20%, but he still used the same 2%. At most it was 5%. That was all. Jiang Hai was a very lazy person, and the laziness he showed was that he was too lazy to think about things. That was how he got lazy. What alliances? It was all the way back to the pre-Qin era. Jiang Hai had to admit that these people thought too much. Maybe if they said more, Jiang Hai wouldn't understand. Third, they got the order wrong. It was because Jiang Hai provided pasture that Du Feynman raised cattle. It was not because Du Feynman raised cattle that Jiang Hai provided pasture. This was a matter of principle. If Jiang Hai didn't sell pasture, they might not even have a job. However, these people didn't know this because it was considered a trade secret. Then what should we do now? Retracting his gaze from Jiang Hai, Akita Jinwoo whispered to the old man behind him. This old man's name was Akita Masashi. Although on the surface, Akita Jinwoo was the leader of the team, but in fact, the one who had the final say was his uncle. One must know that this time, whether it was the Akita family or the Japanese government, both of them were very interested in this business. Japan was sparse and had a large population. Natural resources were extremely scarce. Originally, the production of silver was very high, but it had long been gone. Now, Japan's metal and other things were all given to them by their big brother, the United States. So this time they came to the Middle East with the hope of getting some oil from the Middle East, but could they really get it? Wait, true gold is not afraid of fire. No matter how glib this person is, the quality of the pasture he provides will not change. As long as we check or prove that the pasture provided by Jiang Hai is just ordinary pasture, or if he added something else, then we can persuade Du Feynman. This is also the simplest way. Before that, there is no need to have any conflict with Jiang Hai. Picking up a piece of fish with chopsticks and putting it into his mouth, the old man said slowly while eating. Hearing the old man's words, Akita Jinwoo was relieved. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. If they had a conflict with Jiang Hai at this time, then Du Feynman was very likely to stand on Jiang Hai's side. Then they would be passive. Instead of this, it was better to not take action and wait and see. As long as Jiang Hai was a liar, there would be a day when he would show his tail. As long as that day came, they could seize the opportunity and beat Jiang Hai into the abyss. Yes. Hearing the old man's words, Akita Jinwoo and Ino both responded together. In their opinion, Jiang Hai was bound to lose. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know this. He only knew that Akita Jinwoo was no longer looking at him, which made him relax a lot. However, in Akita Jinwoo's opinion, Jiang Hai was relaxed because he didn't seem to be looking at him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but smile disdainfully. Jiang Hai was still too young. He didn't look at him now because he wanted to pull him down from the altar once and for all in the future. However, even if Jiang Hai knew his thoughts, he probably wouldn't care. He really wanted to see what this guy would look like after inspecting his own forage. It would definitely be wonderful. Over the next few days, Jiang Hai imagined that the Akita family would come to find trouble with him, but that didn't happen. Every day, he and Du Feynman stayed in the ranch, looking at the cattle and sheep, looking at the pasture. To be honest, when Jiang Hai looked at such a large ranch, he was somewhat moved. If he had millions of cows and the average price of a cow was $140,000, he could earn $140 billion a year, in other words, $140 billion? Well, Jiang Hai was just thinking about it. He could guarantee that if he raised so many cows and sold them at this price, he would never have a day of peace. Whether it was the American government or the Huaxia government, they would come looking for him. If they were polite, they would cooperate with him. If they weren't polite, they would directly force him to hand over the secret recipe, and they might even cut him up for research. After all, it was assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars a year. No matter which country it was, they would be eyeing this money. Definitely. Thus, for his own safety, Jiang Hai felt that it was better for him to keep a low profile and slowly make money. He didn't need to take too big a step, or he would pull his balls. He believed that with his annual income of over $1 billion, if he provoked people, he could deal with them with the $2 billion in oil futures in his hands. But he might not be able to do anything more than that. Protecting oneself was one of the most important things in this world. Ancestral Gragon was a legendary quasi-sage, but Jiang Hai wasn't. He didn't know why his scales had evolved into dragon scales. Let alone some spells. He couldn't even fly for 2 days and 3 nights. Jiang Hai and Du Feimin stayed in the ranch. Jiang Hai discovered that Du Feimin didn't use a cowboy to herd the cattle, but instead, he used a helicopter to herd the cattle. At the same time, 5 helicopters took off and flew at a low altitude to herd the cattle within a certain range. Although the sound was a bit loud, the cows looked quite gentle. Tycoons herding cows were different from ordinary rich people like Jiang Hai and the others. After visiting for 2 days, Jiang Hai and the others rested there for the night. The next morning, they took a car and left the ranch. Of course, on the way back, Jiang Hai almost vomited. The desert was really shaking, not at all lower than the waves on the sea. After returning to Dubai, Jiang Hai rested for the night. The next day, he bought a lot of things, mainly souvenirs. What souvenirs were there in Dubai? In fact, there were only 2 kinds of souvenirs that needed to be brought. One was saffron, and the other was gold. For once, Jiang Hai was a tycoon. According to the number of people, each person got a pile of gold jewelry, and there was also a lot of saffron, including the luxury clothes, bags, and so on that Jiang Hai sent back after he finished shopping. He spent almost $2 million on this trip to Dubai, not including the plane ticket. Of course, for Jiang Hai, this was just a drop in the bucket. His cows had already earned so much. He believed that his fish would earn even more, and even more. After all, he was born with a lot of good fish, such as the bluefin golden spear in the fishery, the large yellow croaker, the Yangtze River grenadier, and the Chinese bahaba that he cultivated, plus the salmon, tiger spots, king crabs, dragon crab, lobster. He could almost see Franklin waving at him. After a round of shopping, Jiang Hai and Azalina boarded the plane back to the imperial capital. Compared to when he went, it was much cheaper when he came back. The official cabin only cost 20,000 yuan, and that was including tax. The first-class cabin that Jiang Hai bought was about 50,000 yuan, which was much cheaper than when he came, but the flight time was also much shorter, only about 7 hours. They got on the plane in the morning and were about to arrive in the evening. When the plane landed at the capital airport, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stretch again. To be honest, flying was really tiring. Firstly, the plane was very small, and he couldn't get up and move around casually. Secondly, it was always the same white clouds outside the window, and he really got tired of it. Fortunately, Jiang Hai was sitting in the first-class cabin, and he could still lie down and play games on the iPad. If he was sitting in the economy cabin, it would be very depressing. But fortunately, they finally arrived. After taking their luggage, Jiang Hai and Azalina deliberately changed into thicker clothes, which were actually the clothes they wore when they came from Boston, and then they left. When they walked out of the waiting hall, they saw 4 beautiful women at a glance. At this time, they were standing in the distance, shivering and laughing, waiting for them. These guys. Looking at the 4 beautiful women, Jiang Hai's face showed a warm smile. Chapter 664. Are you stupid? It's winter. Why don't you go in and wait for us? Looking at the four women shivering in the cold, Zhang Hai walked over quickly and looked at the four familiar faces in front of him. He couldn't help but complain. I know you don't pay attention to our situation. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Feng Yunchen, who was waiting for him, couldn't help but pat him and said, Yes, the people waiting for Zhang Hai here at this time are none other than Delina, Marian, Ai Xiaoxi, and Feng Yunchen. Although Delina and Marian came back with Bernice and Lilia, after they came back, they saw Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen. After the six women played together for a day, Bernice and Lilia left by plane because they had to return to their home. As for Delina and Marian, they followed Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen to wait for Zhang Hai in the imperial capital so that they could go back together. After all, the purpose of Zhang Hai's return this year is not only for the new year, but he also has the most important thing to do, move the grave. As Zhang Hai's women, they can't not go. Even if Zhang Hai doesn't say it, they have to go. So Ai Xiaoxi didn't prepare to go home this year, but fortunately, she went back in November. She told her parents that Zhang Hai was going to move the grave. Her parents naturally didn't say anything. In their opinion, Ai Xiaoxi found a trustworthy person. Huh? What's wrong with you? Have you become a public enemy? You don't even dare to pick me up at the airport? Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but ask with some surprise. I just left not long ago. Why are there so many things happening? You really don't pay attention to Sister Ai and Sister Feng. They are now internet celebrities. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Delina couldn't help but smile and say, Ba, little brat. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Internet celebrities are words of abuse. Glancing at Delina, Feng Yunchen looked at her and said. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Daliana couldn't help but stick out her tongue before running to Zhang Hai's side with a smile. What's going on? Zhang Hai was a little confused when he heard what Aliana said. Zhang Hai had heard of internet celebrities before. However, that kind of thing was indeed similar to scolding people. The so-called internet celebrities were internet celebrities. The earliest internet celebrities were internet singers and such. Later on, they gradually disappeared. Now, the so-called internet celebrities mainly referred to the broadcasting industry. Of course, there were also some people who inexplicably became popular on the internet. As for Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen's popularity, after all, they didn't do live broadcasts or anything like that. With Zhang Hai around, they didn't lack money. The reason why they became famous was mainly because of the photos they took at Zhang Hai's place. Although because of their relationship with Zhang Hai, some of the photos were deleted. However, because of their beautiful appearance and the perfect scenery at Zhang Hai's place, these photos still attracted the attention of many otakus on Huaxia's internet. At this time, Feng Yunchen was titled as the otaku's big sister, and Ai Xiaoxi was fully deserving of the title as the otaku's goddess. The Weibo account opened by the two of them used to only have a few thousand zombie fans, all of which were bought by the company. But now, all of them have become millions. Especially in the imperial capital, they are still quite famous. Some rich people even took the initiative to go to their company to discuss business. It was inevitable that they would want to meet the two of them. But at this time, the company's manager would say that the company behind the two of them is the Qi Group. Some of these people could be provoked, but most of them could not be provoked. However, even if they could be provoked, they would not be able to do so. However, even if they can, they will definitely not have any conflict with the Qi Group because of these two women. One must know that the Qi Group is now a huge monster. These two people didn't go in and wait because they were afraid that they would be recognized after going in. That would be troublesome. Are you stupid? If you are afraid of being recognized, then go in and wait in the car. Hearing the explanation of the two women, Zhang Hai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because he usually didn't go to the domestic internet, he really didn't know that they were popular. Aren't we hoping that you will see us when you come out? Really, you have no conscience. Glancing at Zhang Hai, Feng Yunchen patted Zhang Hai's arm again. This guy is too unromantic. Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Zhang Hai also smiled and touched his nose. There is a saying that it is the hardest to enjoy a beauty's grace. In the past, Zhang Hai was often impulsive, and then he would do that, but now it seems that it is indeed his own women who seem to have too many. Let's not talk about it. Let's go home first. Hugging the cold Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the few people here had no opinion. They got into a business car that Feng Yunshan specially borrowed, and the group drove to Feng Yunshan's house. Feng Yunshan's house was a two-bedroom house, so it was divided into 2 rooms to sleep. Originally, Delina and Marian lived in Ai Xiaoxi's room. Today, Azalina was added. As for Zhang Hai, after dinner, he took a shower and went into Feng Yunshan's room. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Tonight, the 3 of them would probably have to spend some time together. The next day, Zhang Hai and the others had a good rest in this house. By the way, Zhang Hai also distributed the things he bought to everyone. Those famous luxury goods, as well as gold jewelry. There was no woman who didn't like glittering things. Seeing these things handed over by Zhang Hai, even Delina and Marian were very excited. They wore them proudly. Looking at their satisfied looks, Zhang Hai also smiled knowingly. He didn't care about money, but it could make him and the people around him happy. This was the most important thing. Everyone played at home for a day. Indeed, there was no place to play. The smog in the capital was particularly serious. Going out was almost the same as waiting for a lung explosion. Now it was winter, and there was no place to play. Zhang Hai and the others were not willing to go to nightclubs, bars, and the like, so they played at home for a day. On the 3rd day after Zhang Hai came to the capital, they took a plane back. Before going back, he specially called Qi Li and told her that he would go back first. At this time, Qi Li was not in the capital, but in Shanghai, discussing a business deal. She told Zhang Hai that she must go when Zhang Hai's parents moved the grave. During the New Year, Zhang Hai also had to go to her house and stay for at least 2 days. This was also the idea of Qi Li's mother. Zhang Hai didn't care about it. He just told her that she could call him when she came back. They took a plane back to Bing City. Naturally, Zhang Hai's friends came to pick him up after knowing that he was back. They looked at Feng Yunshan, Ai Xiaoxi, Azalina, Daliana, and Marian who were beside Zhang Hai. To be honest, it would be a lie if they said that they were not envious. Unfortunately, they were not as capable as Zhang Hai. After sending Zhang Hai and the others back home, Zhang Hai began to get busy. First, he went to buy the grave. In the past, he didn't have money, so he didn't buy a grave. But now, Zhang Hai had money. He wanted to buy the best grave in the best cemetery near Bing City. A small grave cost 2 million yuan. If he paid the full amount, he would be exempted from 10 years of maintenance. Zhang Hai had nothing to say. 2 million yuan was less than $200,000, and Zhang Hai could afford it. He paid the full amount and then paid the maintenance fee for 50 years. After that, Feng Yu asked his men to tell them about moving the grave. His men knew about these things. Of course, these were superstitions. The date, time, and many other things. Zhang Hai had a headache when he heard this. Indeed, moving the grave was the same as burying the dead. It was hard to understand if one didn't earn the money. Zhang Hai was also confused, but it did not stop him from doing these things. Although many people would say, "What's the use of these things?" They were unfilial when they were alive, and they would scream when they were dead. It was troublesome and expensive, and it also promoted superstition. But what should be done must be done, according to the words of the master here. Zhang Hai wanted to move the grave. It was better to wait until 3 years. But Zhang Hai was in a hurry. He could move the grave after this Lunar New Year. This year's Lunar New Year's Eve is February 7th, and the grave cannot be moved before the 15th. That means the grave cannot be moved before the 22nd. Looking at the dates, the earliest was February 25th. Other than that, there were no good days in the next month. Zhang Hai calculated in his heart. In March, he would have to sell grass and fish, so it would be impossible to delay until March or April. That would be his busiest time. If he really couldn't do it, then the 25th would be fine. He had already set a time with the master here. As for the price, Jiang Hai didn't care. He would just spend money to get it done. Although this business was profitable, living people spent money, more or less, to buy peace of mind. Therefore, Jiang Hai directly asked for the highest standard. He was prepared to pay $100,000 for these things. The cost of the grave was not included. He was prepared to pay so much just for this. When the man heard Jiang Hai's words, he was naturally very happy. This was because his family sold these things. Basically, these people sold these things together. Jiang Hai's business could earn him at least 300,000 yuan. Of course, he could earn more than that. But for a big customer like Jiang Hai, he didn't dare to cheat him too much. Because Jiang Hai could take out $100,000 to pay for his family's funeral. Who knew if he would take out $200,000 to take his life? When dealing with such a rich man, it was better to make money honestly. There was no need to think about other things. In addition to these things, Jiang Hai also had to arrange a motorcade to go to the funeral. So far, there were 7 people who would definitely go. Himself, Qi Li, Azalina, Daliana, Marian, Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, and his friends. Adding them together, there were 4 people. Maybe He Xia would also go. Jiang Hai did not know if the others would go, but it was better to prepare a few cars in advance. After everything was settled, Jiang Hai went to have fun with his friends for a few days. After all, before the new year, everyone was relatively free. They gathered together almost every day, playing mahjong, drinking, and even playing games in internet cafes. It could be said that Jiang Hai and his friends were quite free. Of course, Jiang Hai did not forget that Jiang Hai said that he would take Azalina and the others to eat dog meat. Otherwise, they might not open it during the new year. They went to a dog meat restaurant that Jiang Hai used to go to and had a good meal. There were braised dog meat stewed with tofu, dog meat pot, spicy dog meat. The table was full of dishes. In the beginning, when they did not know that it was dog meat, Daliana and Marian enjoyed it very much. But after knowing that it was dog meat, the 2 girls could not eat anymore. Indeed, for people who were not used to eating dog meat was a little difficult to accept. Looking at them, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen laughed happily. In fact, the people who ate dog meat were mainly Han people. This had been passed down since ancient times. In ancient times, cows were not eaten casually. They were the main labor force. Every cow had to be registered. Pigs were very dirty in people's eyes. Because they had not been fried, the taste of their meat was not good. At that time, high officials and nobles mainly ate mutton, while ordinary people ate dog meat. There was an old saying, hanging sheep's head but selling dog meat. Only some nomads, for them, dogs were their assistants in life. For example, when they went hunting, dogs were a member of the family. So for these nomads, they would not eat these dogs. After eating dog meat and playing, time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was February 6th. Tomorrow was New Year's Eve. Today, Qi Li also came back from the capital. No matter how busy she was, she still had to go home during the new year. After coming back, she was not in a hurry to go home. Instead, she went to Jiang Hai's house first. In the evening, she specially called Jiang Hai to their new house and stayed there for a night. Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi had already made up for the past few days, so they did not care about these few days. However, Qi Li missed Jiang Hai very much since the last time she saw Jiang Hai. That night, Qi Li was very crazy. So the next morning, they were awakened by a call from Qi Li's mother, who asked them to go to lunch. After cleaning up, the 2 hurriedly left home and drove Qi Li's car to the Qi family's villa. After Jiang Hai and Qi Li parked their car outside the Qi family's villa, the 2 walked to the front door and gently knocked on it, waiting for someone to open the door from the inside. Sure enough, after knocking on the door, footsteps came from inside. Under the gaze of Jiang Hai and Qi Li, the door was slowly opened. However, the moment the door opened, Jiang Hai was stunned. Chapter 665. Sister, this is brother-in-law, right? Hello, brother-in-law. In Jiang Hai's eyes, a pure white elf was standing in front of him at this time, looking at him with a smile. Looking at her silver-white hair, white and tender skin, and that familiar face, Zhang Hai was completely stunned. "Lilia, you're back. When did you come back?" Seeing the girl in front of her, Qi Li was very excited. She happily hugged the girl in front of her into her arms, and then said while jumping, "I just came back a few days ago. Wasn't I in the United States with second sister for treatment?" While jumping there with Qi Li, the girl's eyes were still gently glancing at Zhang Hai. Seeing her gaze, Zhang Hai subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. What's going on? "Zhang Hai, let me introduce you. This is my youngest sister, Chia. You should have met her when you were young. This is Zhang Hai, your brother-in-law." After Qi Li finished talking to Chia, she turned her gaze to Zhang Hai and began to introduce the two of them. Hey, hello." Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhang Hai was embarrassed. He felt that the air was frozen at this time. What should he say now? Pretend not to know her? He couldn't do it. But if he wanted to say that he knew her, how did he know her? Now, Zhang Hai's mind was blank. He seemed to. Lilia was here, then her sister, Bernice, should be Qi Li's second sister. It seemed that he had inadvertently, probably, some unspeakable secret had happened between him and his two sisters-in-law. Thinking of this, Zhang Hai couldn't wait to turn around and run away. It's too embarrassing. Zhang Hai couldn't help but, however. He knew that he couldn't run, so he felt like a machine without oil. It was as if every step he took was very difficult. Is little Jia back too? But fortunately, Qi Li was immersed in the joy of her sister's return at this time. She looked at Chia and asked her. "And second sister is also back, but she went out to buy something now. She will be back in a while." Hearing Qi Li's words, Chia also said with a smile. Looking at the faint smile on her face, Qi Li also smiled contentedly. This time, their family was finally together. "I'll go see Mom first." After saying a few words to Chia, Qi Li took off her shoes and ran into the house. As for Zhang Hai, he fell behind. "Relax, otherwise it will be exposed." Seeing that Zhang Hai seemed to be frozen by the air around him, Lilia, oh no. Chia walked in front of Zhang Hai and pretended to help Zhang Hai find slippers. In fact, she whispered in Zhang Hai's ear. Feeling the air she breathed into his ear, Zhang Hai was even more at a loss. No matter how much he thought about it, he never thought that it would be such a coincidence that Bernice and Xiaoya were actually Qi Li's younger sisters. Is there a mistake? Are you really Qi Li's sister? Seeing that Chia was about to leave after finishing her words, Zhang Hai immediately grabbed her hand and asked in a low voice. "Of course, it's the real deal. Haven't you experienced it? Tell me the truth, which of us three sisters is the most comfortable?" Looking at Zhang Hai, Lilia didn't know if it was because she had suffered a loss or been drenched in the rain. She took the opportunity to whisper in Zhang Hai's ear. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai's face turned red. It was the first time that he had heard such shameless words. Let's go in." Looking at Zhang Hai's appearance, Lilia also laughed and walked into the room first. Walking into the living room of the villa, he found that Qi Li was already chatting with her mother. Zheng Xiao, whom Zhang Hai had met before, stood beside them. She was listening to them while preparing tea and snacks. Seeing that Zhang Hai walked in, Qi Li's mother couldn't help but stand up and look at Zhang Hai with a smile. "Little Zhang, you're here. Come, take a seat." After greeting Zhang Hai, Qi Li's mother pulled Zhang Hai to sit beside her, which made Zhang Hai more embarrassed. As for Lilia, she sat beside Zhang Hai with a smile. Feeling these people around him, Zhang Hai's body became stiff. "Little Zhang, you should know my daughter. This is my younger daughter, Chia. She's been suffering from an annoying disease, albinism, since she was a child. Her second sister is studying medicine, so she has been receiving treatment in the United States. However, unlike Boston, where you live, they live in the southernmost Miami. I haven't seen them for several years. This year, Lilia's disease has been alleviated and she can move normally under the sun, so they came back. You're all in the United States. If anything happens to them in the future, you have to help take care of them." Seeing that Zhang Hai and Lilia sat down, Qili's mother took Zhang Hai's hand and said earnestly. Hearing her words, Zhang Hai really didn't know what to say. How could he take care of them? He had already taken care of them to bed. If he continued to take care of them, would they have to give birth to several babies? Ahem, Mom, look at what you're saying. My brother-in-law is shy. Looking at Zhang Hai's body that couldn't be any stiffer, Chia's heart was still good. She couldn't help but stand up and say something to Qili's mother, helping Zhang Hai out of this predicament. Yes, yes, yes. But if you have any problems, you can go to your brother-in-law. Your brother-in-law is very powerful now. After you came back, the delicious beef you ate was brought by your brother-in-law. Hearing her younger daughter's words, Qili's mother couldn't help but smile kindly. Then she praised Zhang Hai, which made Zhang Hai a little embarrassed. Obviously, Qili's mother knew that Zhang Hai was not the same as before, so she kept praising Zhang Hai. Of course. In fact, Zhang Hai having a promising future was the scene she was most willing to see. If it wasn't for the stability of the beginning, she wouldn't have let her daughter marry Zhang Hai. If Zhang Hai was always mud that couldn't support the wall, then she would feel sorry for her daughter. Now that Zhang Hai had some power, he was a good match for her daughter. This was even better. Mom, don't worry. If second sister and third sister have any problems in the United States, Zhang Hai will definitely help. Hearing her mother's words, Qili also said with a smile at this time. Hearing this, Zhang Hai, who had nothing to say, lowered his head even more. It was really because he didn't know what he should say at this time. It was really too embarrassing. Fortunately, there was still Zheng Xiaoa, who could help Zhang Hai feel embarrassed because she would pour tea for Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai just focused on fighting with the tea leaves. But drinking too much tea was also a problem. In less than half an hour, Zhang Hai felt that his lower abdomen was a little bloated. He took the initiative to say that, and went to pee. As a result, when he went to the toilet, he thought that it was meaningless to go out so quickly and listen to the three of them. It was better to stay in the toilet for a while, so he squatted in the toilet for more than 10 minutes and played a game before coming out. But just as he came out, he saw the door next to him was opened, and then Bernice walked in with a bunch of things. It really is you. When Bernice and Zhang Hai's eyes met, Zhang Hai's last hope was shattered. It really was her. Hey, you're here. Are you happy with this surprise? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Bernice put down the things with a smile and walked over carefully. She glanced at the people in the room and didn't pay attention to them, so she smiled and said to Zhang Hai, There is no surprise, but there is a lot of fright. What should I call you now? Bernice, Qijie, or sister-in-law? Looking at Bernice, Zhang Hai said somewhat speechlessly. He really inadvertently did something that angered people and gods. It's up to you, but when we do that, do you want me to call you husband? Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Bernice walked over, gently tapped Zhang Hai's chest with her fingertips, and then said sweetly in Zhang Hai's ear. Before Zhang Hai could react, she had already put her arms around Zhang Hai's neck and took the initiative to kiss him. Their lips and teeth intertwined. He had to admit that kissing his sister-in-law here was really too embarrassing. Zhang Hai wanted to push her away in a panic, but she grabbed Zhang Hai's hand and pressed it against her upper body. Hey, you are looking for death. After a long time, Zhang Hai looked at Bernice and said with some fear. If this was seen, he couldn't clear his name even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Of course, the premise was that he was not that clean. Tisk, coward. I'll come to you at night. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Qijie, who was also Bernice, gave him a stern look and then walked in with her things with a smile. As for Zhang Hai, he wiped his mouth again. After making sure that there was nothing special on his face, he walked back to the villa's living room. Naturally, after he went in, there was a new round of introductions. Bernice's acting was also good. She pretended that it was the first time she saw Zhang Hai. Indeed, Chia could say that she had seen Zhang Hai when she was young. However, this was the first time Qijie had seen Zhang Hai. Zhang Hai's awkwardness seemed to have relapsed. Although in this home, Zhang Hai felt particularly awkward, the overall atmosphere was still very good. Everyone was together for the new year. After dinner in the evening, At 8 o'clock, they watched the New Year's Gala while making dumplings. Although this year's New Year's Gala was really not that good, everyone was more to experience this kind of atmosphere of reunion. By the time the New Year's Gala ended, it was already late at night. Except for Jiang Hai, everyone else was a little sleepy, especially Qi Li's mother. Old people were like this. They were sleepy especially early at night, but they also got up early in the morning. Qi Li's mother was like this. After eating the dumplings at 12 o'clock, everyone went back to rest. Jiang Hai naturally lived with Qi Li. After returning to the room, Jiang Hai went to take a shower first, but halfway through, Qi Li walked in. "Sir, do you want me to help you scrub your back?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and stretched out his hand. Then Qi Li also stepped into the bathtub in the bathroom. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she directly pounced on him. They didn't scrub his back, but except for his back, they rubbed the other place as well. An hour later, Qi Li lay in Jiang Hai's arms like a puddle of mud. Listening to Jiang Hai's strong heartbeat, Qi Li's face was full of a satisfied smile. They'd just been crazy for more than 2 hours last night, and now it was late. Qi Li really didn't have much energy. After lying in the bathtub for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai looked at her fingers that were already wrinkled and took the initiative to pick her up. After wiping her hands clean, he carried her to the bed in the room. As soon as Qi Li touched the bed, she turned over and was about to sleep. "Aren't you thirsty? Do you want some water?" Seeing that Qi Li was about to fall asleep, Jiang Hai couldn't help but push her and ask her. "Well, I'm too sleepy. I'm going to sleep directly. If you're thirsty, then go downstairs and get water. There's some in the refrigerator." Maybe Qi Li was really sleepy. She was too lazy to open her eyes and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but spank her butt. Then he put on his pajamas, left the room, and prepared to go downstairs to the kitchen to get water. But just as he walked to the stairs, a figure suddenly rushed out from the side and grabbed Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai fixed his eyes and found that the person who grabbed him was no one else but Bernice. "Oh, she should be called Qi Jia now. I've been waiting for you for an hour. You should have done it in the room. Humph, this guy really knows how to enjoy himself. Now you're mine." Looking at Jiang Hai's confused expression, Bernice whispered, then pulled Jiang Hai into her room. What happened next didn't need to be said. It was almost 1 o'clock when it was time to go to bed, but when Jiang Hai came out of Qi Jia's room, it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning. He was really thirsty. After coming out, he didn't go back to sleep directly. He still wanted to go downstairs to get water. But just as he walked to the kitchen, he found that Qi was in the kitchen at this time. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, she also smiled and then hooked her finger at Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai also walked over as he wished, but first, he took the water and drank the water in the cup. Looking at the charming Qia in front of him, there was nothing to say. Anyway, it wasn't like they hadn't tried it in the kitchen. Qia bit her finger and endured the impact of shyness. The battle started again when he returned to Qi Li's room again. It was already 5 o'clock in the morning. The sky outside was already bright. Jiang Hai was really tired. Doing that kind of thing was actually quite physically exhausting. Holding Qi Li, Jiang Hai slowly fell asleep. Chapter 666. Yawning, Qi Li walked down the stairs in a mess. She glanced at the living room. As expected of the new year, she slept too late last night. At this time, in the living room, except for her mother, her 2 sisters were still asleep, and her husband, Jiang Hai, was still sleeping. Of course, she didn't know what happened last night. "You're up. Did you sleep well?" Seeing her daughter coming down, Qi Li's mother, who was sitting on the sofa and watching TV at this time, couldn't help but smile and pat the seat next to her, saying to Qi Li. Hearing her mother's words, Qi Li also rushed over and sat there. "Not bad, after all, it's my own home. There's nothing I can't get used to." Looking at her mother with a smile, Qi Li said, "It's just the 2 of us now, so I have something to ask you. You and Jiang Hai have been married for almost 3 years, right?" Looking at Chili's appearance, Chili's mother also nodded with a smile, but then her face changed, and she looked at Chili and asked, this year is the 3rd year. Thinking about it, Jiang Hai and her got married. In fact, it hasn't been 2 years. But if one were to count the years, it had already been 3 years. Time really flew by, in the blink of an eye. I know that you don't like Jiang Hai. Tell me the truth, did you and Jiang Hai that do the things that a husband and wife should do? Looking at Chili, Chili's mother lowered her voice and asked her. She was really afraid of her daughter, who still maintained a pure relationship with Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Chili's face suddenly turned red. This is really not easy to answer. Well, we did that. Although we didn't see each other much, when we met, we would do that. But although her face was very red, she still hesitated and said. Hearing her words, Chili's mother also nodded. As long as her daughter accepted Jiang Hai, it was a good thing. Since you and he have done that, what protection do you have? Looking at Chili, her mother continued to ask. No, Jiang Hai doesn't like it. Thinking of Jiang Hai's habits, Chili couldn't help but secretly snort. Jiang Hai's habits are really not good. That's strange. Why didn't you get pregnant? Hearing Chili's words, Chili's mother couldn't help but say, with some hesitation. Well, it's true, except for when I am not very convenient. We have done it a lot of times, but we really didn't have a baby. Hearing her mother's words, Chili couldn't help but say with some doubts. In fact, she originally wanted to say that in addition to her, Jiang Hai actually has a lot of women, and Jiang Hai didn't bring those things or let them take medicine. Under such circumstances, Jiang Hai actually didn't have a single woman. This is indeed a bit strange. Thinking about it carefully, is there something wrong with Jiang Hai? In the next few days, I will take you to check. See if you can check Jiang Hai's side. Old people are eager to have grandchildren. It has been 3 years, and her daughter's stomach hasn't shown any signs of pregnancy. It is impossible for her not to be anxious. Jiang Hai, I don't think you will go. Thinking of Jiang Hai, what he is most afraid of is embarrassment. He probably won't go. Hearing Chili's words, Chili's mother couldn't help but be a little depressed. But then she thought about it. Chili's mother whispered to Chili. Maybe they can change their thinking. It doesn't matter if Jiang Hai goes or not, as long as he goes to check the things he wants to check, then it will be fine. Although it is reasonable to say that it needs to be 4 days of abstinence for it to be effective, Jiang Hai should have no problem. While the mother and daughter were studying there, it was already noon in the blink of an eye. Chia, and Jiang Hai also came out of the room. Today is the first day of the new year. It can be regarded as the real new year. Jiang Hai had already distributed the gifts yesterday. Fortunately, he brought a lot of things, including gold jewelry and luxury goods, so the 2 sisters-in-law who suddenly appeared didn't have a New Year's gift. But in fact, the gifts that Jiang Hai prepared for them have already been sent back to Winthrop. It can only be said that these 2 guys are lucky. After staying at home for a day on the first day of the new year, they naturally have to stay here at night. As long as Jiang Hai and Chili slept together, Chili would naturally have needs. But today, Chili was a little strange. Although she still didn't bring a raincoat, she asked Jiang Hai to put it on her. Jiang Hai also listened to her opinion. After finishing, Jiang Hai went to drink water. As for Chili, she quietly collected the things on her body and put them in a sealed container that has been sterilized. She decided that after sending Jiang Hai home tomorrow, she will go to the hospital to check on herself and Jiang Hai. Nothing happened that night. The next morning, Chili sent Jiang Hai home. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, who hadn't seen Jiang Hai for 3 days, missed him very much when they saw him. Although they knew that these 2 little sluts were with Jiang Hai, nothing good would happen. But Chili had more important things to do, so she left. After going to the hospital, she and Jiang Hai's things were tested. Based on the people that Chili's mother found, they quickly came to the conclusion that Chili's body was fine. Of course, there were many things that needed to be checked, but at first glance, there was no problem. As for Jiang Hai's things, there was no problem either. The only problem was that Jiang Hai's things were too strong and had a strong survival ability. In other words, it was very strong. In other words, Zhang Hai's things were fighting in Qi Li and Feng Yunshen's bodies, fighting for the opportunity to merge. Basically, before the boss was chosen, they all died. That was why they got pregnant. Sometimes being too thin and weak was a problem. Being too strong was also a problem. Fortunately, it didn't prevent them from getting pregnant. It was just that the chances were lower. Who knew when the boss would get pregnant? And it was foreseeable that the quality would be quite good. For such a result, Qi Li and Feng Yunshen really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fortunately, nothing happened, and that was the most important thing. Zhang Hai didn't know about these things. After he returned home, he accompanied Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen for a few days. On the 15th day of the month, he went to Qi Li's house to stay for 2 days. Then it was the day that he set to move the graves. Qi Li could have had an earlier holiday, but she had to stay at home for a while during the new year. In addition, Zhang Hai needed to move the graves, so he had to wait for a while before he went back to work. That was why he was so busy and came back so late. Now that he had some time, he could stay at home until March, and then go back to work in the capital. Early in the morning, many cars drove to Zhang Hai's house. These cars were all black Bentleys, which Qi Li found. After learning that Zhang Hai was going to move the graves, she paid attention to it. Naturally, Zhang Hai didn't need to worry about the motorcade. Zhang Hai's friends also came. When they saw Bernice, oh no, Qi Jia and Chia, they were stunned. When they went to visit Zhang Hai, they saw Qi Jia and Chia, but they didn't know the relationship between them and Qi Li. Therefore, they thought that Zhang Hai directly brought them back. They had to admit that as Zhang Hai, he had money and girls. What was there to be dissatisfied with? In addition to Zhang Hai's women and friends, the only person who didn't know his friends and women well was Xia. Today, Xia came with her 4-year-old son. Zhang Hai saw her once when her son was born, but he didn't see her again. Seeing Zhang Hai's extravagance, Xia, who had some doubts about whether Zhang Hai was really in the United States, was completely convinced at this time. It seemed that her cousin was not an ordinary person. According to Bing City's customs, they had to admit that it was really troublesome. Fortunately, the cremated remains of Zhang Hai's parents were placed in the crematorium, and the other party had already prepared everything. There was no need to set up a grave, pick up the bones, or make a grave mound. But even so, Zhang Hai was still very busy. From 5 a.m. to dawn, the motorcade set off. It was not until 11 a.m. that everything was done. Then they went to the restaurant Zhang Hai booked for a meal to thank him for his help. You're doing well now. Aunt's spirit in heaven will be very pleased to see you like this. After greeting everyone, Zhang Hai returned to the restaurant. He sat there and was about to take a bite, but at this time, Xia came over with her son in her arms. She looked at Zhang Hai and said with a smile, "I hope so." Hearing her words, Zhang Hai also smiled. A child wants to support his parents, but the parents are not there. This sentence could not be more appropriate for him. Which one is your wife? And these are... Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia looked at the other people at the table and asked with some doubts. Those men were naturally Zhang Hai's friends. But when she came, she was very interested in the 3 foreign women and the large group of women. Now that they were all sitting together, she was even more interested. Oh, this is my wife, Qi Li. You should have met her before. These 2 are my adopted daughters in the United States, Delina and Maxianen. These 2 are Qi Li's sisters, Qi Jia and Chia. The remaining 3 are my friends. This is my former classmate, Feng Yunshen. This is Ai Xiaoxi. This is Azalina Vicabrio. This is my uncle's cousin, Xia, and this is my nephew. Hearing Xia's words, Zhang Hai remembered that he hadn't introduced them to them yet, so he immediately stood up and introduced them to them. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Xia shook hands with Qi Li first. Her husband was also a businessman. Although his assets were only a few million, he often took her to some high-end places. Therefore, her eyes were still very sharp when it came to clothes, jewelry, and the like. Whether it was Qi Li, Delina, Maxianen, Chia, Qi Jia, Azalina, or Feng Yunshen, AI Xiaoxi's clothes were all from very expensive brands, especially Qili. The clothes she was wearing should be tailor-made for Burberry. The coat alone was worth 150,000 yuan, and the clothes inside were even more expensive. Her clothes were almost 400,000 yuan in total, not including the watches, bags, and shoes, which were also extremely luxurious brands. Her entire outfit was worth at least 3 to 5 million yuan. Moreover, she had a luxurious aura and spoke very appropriately. In an instant, she gave people a feeling that they could only look up to her. However, what surprised her was that such a noble and domineering older sister was wearing a set of gold jewelry at this time. In an instant, she felt that her level had been lowered. In fact, it was reasonable to say that Qili usually didn't wear gold jewelry. Although platinum and diamonds would lose money when they were bought, it was still better than wearing gold jewelry. Therefore, not only Qili but also Qia and Qijia usually didn't wear gold jewelry. But now, they were wearing gold jewelry because these things were given to them by Jiang Hai, which was the most important thing. "Hello, sister." "Oh, this handsome boy, how old is he?" Hearing Jiang Hai's introduction, Qili also turned her head and said to Xia lightly. Then she looked at Xia's 4-year-old son. But obviously, Xia's 4-year-old son was a little timid. As soon as he saw Qili's head come closer, he took the initiative to run behind Xia and looked at her timidly. Chapter 667. Huaxia was too big, and every region had different customs. For example, some provinces and cities in the south were particular about men having their birthdays close to each other and women having their birthdays full. The meaning was simple. Men's birthdays were close to each other, and women's birthdays were full. For example, for men's 60th birthday, they had to celebrate their birthdays at 59 years old, and women had to celebrate their birthdays at 60 years old. But in Bing City, it was different. Jiang Hai's eldest uncle was 60 years old this year, and in today's society, 60 years old was not considered old. Most people chose not to celebrate their birthdays, but Jiang Hai's eldest uncle still chose to celebrate his birthdays. After all, this was considered his official retirement. This morning, his eldest uncle and his family changed into new clothes and coats and went to the hotel they booked. They were waiting for the guests to come and celebrate his birthday. That's right. He did not put it at home. He put it at the hotel. Jiang Hai's eldest uncle had 2 daughters, and both daughters had 2 son-in-laws who were doing business. Naturally, they had a lot of friends. In addition to Jiang Hai's relatives as well as Jiang Hai's aunt's relatives, there were quite a lot of people. There were about 6 or 7 tables. The people who came first went to find a place to play cards or mahjong. Of course, most of the people were there to chat. The dinner was booked at 11:30 p.m. Jiang Hai really did not want to come. He wanted to come on time, but Qili did not think so. Jiang Hai was not on good terms with his relatives, but Qili was his daughter-in-law, and she had to come earlier. Jiang Hai did not want to bring her along, but she knew that it was not good for her not to come. He was in a dilemma. In the end, Jiang Hai and Qili arrived at 11 p.m. They drove Qili's car. When they arrived at the hotel, the receptionist saw them and went up to them. This receptionist was He's friend, and Jiang Hai had met him before. After exchanging some pleasantries, they walked into the lobby and paid the red packet at the entrance. Jiang Hai had wanted to give them 500 renminbi. Anyway, he did not prepare for it, and his family could still return it. But Qili did not feel good. Jiang Hai and Qili were not short of money. Although he was 60 years old and did not have a good life, he still gave them a red packet of 2,000 renminbi. Jiang Hai was quite reluctant to give it. After receiving the red packet, Jiang Hai and Qili entered the lobby. When Jiang Hai and Qili walked in, many people looked at them. Of course, they were not looking at Jiang Hai, but at Qili. Qili was really beautiful. In addition, she was wearing expensive clothes and had the aura of an iceberg CEO. No matter where she went, she was the absolute center of attention. The moment Qili walked in, both men and women turned to look at them. Of course, the men were looking at Qili's extremely good looks. Even if she was wearing winter clothes, she still had a very good figure. The women were looking at Chili's clothes, bags, and jewelry. But when they found that those things seemed to be very expensive, they were a little disdainful. In their opinion, these clothes might be real. However, such a set of clothes must be fake. In their eyes, Chili was wearing a fake set of clothes. If Chili knew what they were thinking, she would probably laugh. At this time, Zhang Hai's relatives also saw Zhang Hai and Chili. After Zhang Hai walked in, he actually saw these people from afar, but he didn't want to talk to them. He just went to his uncle, wished him happiness, and introduced Chili to him. Then he found a corner to eat melon seeds. Chili didn't have any intention to understand these people, so she sat next to Zhang Hai and talked to him about the restaurant. Yo, brother, I heard from Sister Yu that you were in Dubai. Didn't you have time to come? How did you get the time? While Zhang Hai and Chili were chatting, a girl who seemed to be in her 20s came over with a boy who was about the same age as her. She asked Zhang Hai with a smile. The boy beside her kept his head down and glanced at Chili. Indeed, compared to Chili, this girl, whether it was her aura or her appearance, was much worse. This girl was called Hirue, the daughter of Zhang Hai's second uncle. She was 23 years old this year and had just graduated from college. It was said that she worked in a medical equipment company, and the boy next to her was her boyfriend, the owner of the company. In this era, the medical equipment business had no dignity. Doctors and nurses could make them bleed, but they did make a lot of money, especially when it was related to the state. For example, when the heart stents were produced, the materials, labor, taxes, and so on were all included. When it was sold, the domestic stents were sold for 12,000 yuan, and the imported ones were sold at a sky-high price, and the medical insurance didn't reimburse them. However, you had to buy them. This was the reality. Therefore, the medical equipment business made a lot of money. However, no matter how much money they made, they couldn't make as much as Zhang Hai and Chili. The Qi Group, which was controlled by Chili, had a total market value of more than 20 billion yuan, of which it had increased by nearly 7 billion yuan this year. The Qi family held more than half of the shares, monopolizing more than 10 billion yuan. When it was distributed to Chili, it was at least 3 billion yuan. Therefore, she was a well-deserved rich woman. Of course, compared with Zhang Hai, there was still a big gap. In only 1 year, Zhang Hai had made 3 billion yuan from selling cattle and 2 billion yuan from digging treasures in the sea. Zhang Hai's assets, in terms of RMB, were at least 20 billion yuan, not including the land of the manor. However, when the fishing season started next month, his assets should double again. According to his estimation, it shouldn't be a problem for him to double. The day before yesterday was the day your aunt moved her grave, so I definitely had to come back. Glancing at her, Zhang Hai said calmly. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Hirue was at a loss for words, but still wore a disdainful expression on her face. In fact, these people all knew that Zhang Hai had moved his parents' graves, and He Xia was the only one who went there in the end. In their eyes, they didn't need this cousin of theirs. Since he wasn't needed, there was no need for him to attend such a thing and pay for it. Therefore, everyone pretended that they didn't know about it, but they couldn't say it out loud. Once Zhang Hai said it, they directly stopped talking. Of course, Zhang Hai didn't want to talk to her either. What was there to talk about? Cousin, right? Nice to meet you. My name is Dong Jian, and I'm Rui's boyfriend. May I know where you work? This should be sister-in-law, right? Feeling that she was suppressed by Zhang Hai, Hirue felt a little embarrassed, so she gently nudged her boyfriend who was staring at Chili with the tip of her elbow and asked him to speak. Her boyfriend reacted quickly and immediately said with a smile, "Oh, I raise cattle, and this is your sister-in-law." Looking at Dong Jian who came over, Zhang Hai didn't even look at him, and said while drinking tea. Looking at Zhang Hai's attitude, Dong Jian frowned. This Zhang Hai is a little arrogant. But he didn't stop there. Didn't Zhang Hai say that he was a cattle breeder? Raising cattle? Raising cattle? What can he do? Hey? Raising cattle to make money now? I heard that raising cattle can at most earn 800 to 1,000 renminbi per cow, and you still have to work hard for more than a year. It's not worth it. Why don't you come to my family's company for an interview? You can start from the bottom. You can get a guaranteed salary of 3,000 renminbi per month, and the commission will be calculated separately. If you do well, you will be my family, and I can promote you to a manager. Dong Jian looked at Zhang Hai and said to Zhang Hai. To him, what he said was very generous. The cost of living in Bing City was not high, and a new graduate can get 3,000 renminbi per month with commission. At Zhang Hai's age, of course, it was not the same as a new graduate. But the starting salary of 3,000 renminbi per month with commission was still very attractive to some office workers. If the market was not good, they could at least get 5,000 to 6,000 renminbi per month. If they had good connections, they could even get 10,000 renminbi per month. Dear, he doesn't want you to raise cattle, and he wants you to work. Hee hee. What a joke. When Zhang Hai heard what Dong Jian said, he didn't know what to say. If it was a year ago, this might be a good job for him. But now, ha ha ha. Qili laughed when she heard what Dong Jian said. She knew why Zhang Hai did not want to come to Bing City. Sister-in-law, what's so funny about this? Dong Jian was stunned when he saw Qili smile. But he reacted quickly and looked at Qili. Although he knew that Qili's words were not good, he was still willing to listen. I'm sorry. It's not that I look down on you and your company. But from the looks of it, my husband will not work at your company. Shaking her head, Qili couldn't help but say in a bureaucratic tone when she heard Dong Jian still wanted to ask why. These people are really outrageous. Dong Jian's face turned ugly when he heard Qili's reply. The conversation was killed again. Oh, brother is here. Little Rui is also here. Brother, aren't you in Dubai? Why are you back? But at this moment, their savior came. They only saw the youngest daughter of Zhang Hai's uncle, Hiyu, coming over with a man who was much older than Zhang Hai. As soon as she came to Zhang Hai's table, she said sarcastically. It seemed that she had already told them everything about Zhang Hai being in Dubai. According to Zhang Hai's routine last year, they would believe that Zhang Hai had the money to go out and play. Didn't you hear what your sister said? If your sister didn't say it, then pretend that I didn't say it. Listening to Hiyu's words, Zhang Hai shook his head. He was already a little lazy to explain these things because they had already determined that he was lying, so there was no need to explain.
Dubai? Brother, you really dare to say that.
I did some research. If you want to go to Dubai, it will cost about 30,000 yuan for 2 people. If you and that money, how good would it be for you and sister-in-law to live a good life? We are all family. Who doesn't know each other? Don't say this in the future. Hearing Zhang Hai's lazy explanation, Hiyu thought that she was right and said with a proud face. What? Hearing Hiyu's words, Zhang Hai treated it as if she was farting, but Qili raised her eyebrows. She really didn't think that Zhang Hai had such a status in her family. Just as she was about to say something to stand up for Zhang Hai, her hand was grabbed by Zhang Hai. Feeling Zhang Hai's palm, Qili's heart gradually calmed down. She thought much more than Zhang Hai, because she could see that these people had been targeting Zhang Hai for a long time. It was very likely that after Zhang Hai's mother passed away, they treated Zhang Hai like this. Thinking of her past, she seemed to be one of these people. Thinking of this, Qili's hand that was holding Zhang Hai's hand tightened. Sometimes people always unintentionally hurt others, and her really wasn't particularly unintentional. But it doesn't matter if you don't have a chance to go. My husband and I have decided to go on our honeymoon. 35,000 yuan for an ordinary family is a lot of money, but for us, it doesn't matter, right, husband? Ignoring Qili's thoughts, Hiyu couldn't help but look at Xiangming next to her and said with a smile. At this time, Xiangming was also looking at Qili. However, it wasn't that kind of thinking. Instead, he was deep in thought, as if he was recalling something. It wasn't until Hiyu called out to him that he reacted. However, he didn't have the time to care about his silly girlfriend. Instead, he carefully moved closer to her. Excuse me, are you President Qi of the Qi Group? Xiangming asked Qili with great caution. Oh, do we know each other? Because Xiangming came with Hiyu, Qili originally didn't want to talk to him. However, she didn't expect him to know her. This surprised Qili a little. She didn't have many friends in Bing City, especially low-class people like Xiangming. I don't know. I dare not say that I know you. I have been to your restaurant and bumped into you at the corridor. I was with Chief Zhang and introduced myself once. I think you are a person of high status and have forgotten about me. Let me introduce myself again. My name is Xiangming, and I own Shanghong Real Estate. This company has some reputation in Bing City, but it cannot be compared to your Qi group. Upon hearing Qi Li's words, Xiangming immediately turned into his lackey mode and knelt down with a smirk on his face. After hearing his words, He Yu, He Rui, and Dong Jian, who was next to him, were all stunned. This was different from what they had said just now. They were going to ridicule Jiang Hai. What was going on? The three of them looked at each other and then looked at Xiangming. Did this guy make a mistake? What the hell was this? President Qi? However, at this time, another exclamation came from the side. They turned around and saw He Xia and her family. Chapter 668. The person who made this sound was none other than He Xia's husband, Qian Fei. This guy was actually not a good person. This could be seen from the fact that he was walking alone in front while He Xia was carrying a bag and carrying a child behind him. However, when she saw Jiang Hai arrive, He Xia still smiled and nodded to Jiang Hai. Then, she carried the child and walked over. As for Qian Fei, he had already squeezed Xiangming to the side and looked at Qi Li with a fawning expression. President Qi, why are you here? I really didn't know that your arrival really brought glory to our canopy. Looking at Qi Li, Qian Fei said with a smile. Hearing his words, Qi Li just smiled and nodded. Then she looked at He Xia and her son. Come, nephew, come to auntie. Looking at He Xia's son in front of her, Qi Li said with a smile. Yes, go and let President Qi hug him. President Qi, this is my son. Seeing that Qi Li ignored him, Qian Fei didn't care and still said with a smile. His fawning mode was not ordinary. Hey, little handsome, do you recognize me? Hearing his father's words, He Xia's son, who was still a little afraid, couldn't help but hide back. However, Qi Li took a step forward and looked at He Xia's son with a smile. Yes, I recognize you. Looking at his parents, He Xia's son whispered. When Qian Fei wanted to go forward to speak, he was pulled by He Yu. At the same time, she pulled Xiangming, who was about to go over and fawn. Old Xiang, brother-in-law, what's the matter with you two? What are you doing? Aren't we here to expose Jiang Hai? What are you two doing? Looking at the two people in front of her, He Yu was really angry. This was simply a slap in her face. She has something to do with Jiang Hai? Hearing He Yu's words, Qian Fei, who came in later, didn't quite understand the situation. He glanced at them in confusion and didn't say anything. He just sat there and watched Qi Li and He Xia's son play with Jiang Hai with a smile. She's Jiang Hai's wife. She's born with a foxy appearance. Just like Jiang Hai, she's obviously not a good person. She's even wearing branded goods from street stalls. She still has the nerve to wear them out. Hearing Qian Fei's words, He Yu couldn't help but feel a little angry. What do you know? This is CEO Qi. Let Xiangming tell you. CEO Qi, my son is quite smart, right? Haha, I really didn't think that CEO Qi and my son would be so fated. I didn't even know that CEO Qi was Little Hai's wife. Then I'm quite embarrassed to call myself brother-in-law. Come, son, call aunt. Hearing He Yu's words, Qian Fei couldn't help but glare at her. Then, he turned on his lackey mode again and walked over with a smile on his face. If it weren't for his ears, he probably would have grinned. What's going on? Qian Fei could ignore He Yu, but Xiangming couldn't. Therefore, He Yu grabbed Xiangming, who also wanted to kneel and lick her feet, and said angrily. This was completely different from her original script. Your cousin may not be as simple as you think. CEO Qi's name is Qi Li. She's the general manager of Qi's group. It can be said that Qi's group belongs to her family. Because the chairman is her mother, this company has a close relationship with the imperial court. Its total assets are tens of billions. In other words, the woman in front of you has a net worth of more than 10 billion. Compared to her, I'm just a small insect. So if you don't want me to go bankrupt, you'd better be careful with your words. Hearing he used words, Xiangming immediately explained in a low voice. Hearing Xiangming's words, He's first reaction was confusion. Her second reaction was that it was impossible. Her third reaction was that they must have mistaken her for someone else. Zhang Hai. It could be said that they grew up together. They knew better than anyone else what kind of life he had. How could such a poor loser one day be able to hook up with such a fair, rich, and beautiful woman? No matter whether others believed it or not, he didn't believe it. Even if this fair, rich, and beautiful woman was tired of playing outside and her body was damaged, it was absolutely impossible for her to let Zhang Hai take advantage of her. Therefore, after hearing Xiangming's words, He didn't understand. She couldn't understand what was going on at all. In fact, now not only Hiu, but also He Rue and her boyfriend, Dong Jian, were confused. They looked at Zhang Hai with disbelief. Although it was Qi Li's net worth of 10 billion, Zhang Hai was Qi Li's husband. No matter how poor he was, it was absolutely impossible for him to lack money. Especially Dong Jian. What did he say just now? Going to work in his company with a basic salary of 3,000 yuan? Damn. He believed that if Zhang Hai was willing, he could even open such a company by himself. Did he say something wrong just now? Yes, he was very sure himself. Zhang Hai is not like what you think. You should have gone the day before yesterday. Zhang Hai's current strength is far beyond what you can imagine. His home is in Boston, and he has adopted 2 foreign girls. According to what I said when I chatted with them, Zhang Hai does indeed raise cattle in Boston. However, his manor is worth $280 million. They didn't say how much he earns in a year, but looking at them, it's definitely not a small amount. Most importantly, between Zhang Hai and Qi Li, Zhang Hai is the dominant one. You know what this means, right? Looking at her younger sister's confused look, Hixia inched closer and whispered to her. Hearing Hixia's words, Hiyu and Hirue's expressions became even worse. The 2 girls glanced at Zhang Hai. To be honest, they were in a very bad mood now that a person they had always looked down on suddenly sat on top of them. They were used to being arrogant. Although they were snobbish, they really couldn't bring themselves to look for Zhang Hai. So they turned their heads and left first. Hirue thought for a moment and remembered her face just now. If she were Zhang Hai, she wouldn't forgive herself, so she also turned and left. As for Dong Jian, although he also wanted to curry favor with Zhang Hai, he had nothing to say since Hirue wasn't there. And, in his opinion, in fact, he seemed to be the one who offended Zhang Hai the most. A basic salary of 3,000 yuan. Sigh. Wasn't this a slap to Zhang Hai's face? So, he also left with his tail between his legs. As for Qi Li, after playing with Hixia's children for a while, she also sat next to Zhang Hai. She clearly told Xiangming and Qianfei that they needed to be quiet, so the 2 had to leave. Soon, everyone who came knew that Zhang Hai was now successful. He found a boss with a net worth of 10 billion yuan to be his wife. Even Zhang Hai's uncles and aunts were alarmed. Zhang Hai's first uncle Hiweihua, second uncle Hiweiya, Uncle Hiweian, and Aunt Hijili all asked their families to come and chat with Zhang Hai. Xiangming, Qianfei, and Qili could ignore them, but Zhang Hai's immediate relatives really couldn't say anything. They could only deal with it with a smile. Their children also came to talk to Qili. Some even directly asked for her phone number. Facing such a situation, Qili looked at Zhang Hai helplessly. Zhang Hai could only shrug his shoulders and express that he couldn't help. Originally, he didn't want to let Qili come. Qili insisted on coming, so he couldn't be blamed. Before the banquet started, Zhang Hai's table was the most lively. After the banquet started, it was even more lively. Everyone wanted to sit at this table. Because of this, they almost quarreled. In the end, when they saw that Qili was a little unhappy, they restrained themselves. However, the theme of the banquet was completely messed up. Originally, it was to celebrate Zhang Hai's uncle's 60th birthday. But now, The main character had become Chili. In this regard, Chili could only laugh. After lunch, Zhang Hai's uncle originally invited Zhang Hai and Chili to stay and eat at his house in the evening. However, Zhang Hai didn't agree. He could see that Chili already regretted coming here. So he said that he had something to do, and then left. After walking out of the restaurant, Zhang Hai looked at Chili, who was a little tired. He couldn't help but hug her shoulder and smile. "You must be tired." Looking at Chili, Zhang Hai said with a smile. Chili felt Zhang Hai's hand and also leaned on Zhang Hai's shoulder. "Yeah, this is the first time I've dealt with something like this. In the past, I went to those social gatherings whenever I wanted to, and I didn't go if I didn't want to. No one would give me a hard time, so I still had to accept it. Coming to you today has really been a training exercise." Rubbing her stiff face, Chili said helplessly. Her starting point was too high. Her first job was the general manager of the Luz Group. When her connections and money accumulated to a certain extent, even if she was a woman, no one would dare to show off to her. It was completely impossible for her to encounter the things that ordinary female employees encountered in the workplace. Seeing that Chili was a little tired, Zhang Hai also tightened his arms. He didn't know how he felt about the woman in his arms at this time. Was it the initial gratitude, excitement, love, family, friendship, or the initial hatred? Or was it guilt? Zhang Hai was a little confused. He really didn't know what to say to Chili now. After all, the relationship between them was not so pure. In the afternoon, Zhang Hai took Chili back to his home. After playing with AI Xiaoxi, Feng Yunchen, Daliana, Marian, and Azalina at home, Chili spent the night at Zhang Hai's house for the first time, but unfortunately, Zhang Hai lived on the sofa. The next morning, the first to leave was Chili because she had to go back to work. The second to leave was AI Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen. Zhang Hai also asked them if they had made up their minds to go to Boston with Zhang Hai, but the two women seemed to have made up their minds at this time. They would go, but not now. They would wait until next year. Zhang Hai could wait, so it didn't matter. After they left, Bernice and Lilia, oh no, now they should be called Shijia and Zhaoya, joined Zhang Hai's house because they were preparing to return to Winthrop with Zhang Hai. After AI Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen left, Zhang Hai and the others also prepared to leave. On February 29th this year, Zhang Hai and the others stayed at home for 2 days. On March 2nd, they boarded a plane to the imperial capital. They were going to go from the imperial capital to New York and then from New York to Boston. There was no other way. There were only a few domestic flights to the United States, so Zhang Hai and the others had to be in such a hurry. As they entered March, everything was different. Although Boston was definitely the northernmost area in the United States, except for Alaska, its latitude was about the same as the imperial capital. In March, the imperial capital was already in full bloom, and so was Boston. After getting off the plane, Robbins Garcia and the others drove over to pick up Zhang Hai and the others. On the way from New York to Boston, Zhang Hai could see that the snow had basically melted. After all, after entering March, the average daily temperature could reach about 8 degrees. Even on the coldest night, which was around 0 degrees Celsius, it was difficult for snow to stubbornly grow on the ground. With the nourishment of this layer of snow, this year's new grass was also growing healthily. The trees were sprouting new buds, the grass was growing new heads, and although the flowers had not bloomed, they were still budding. Looking at the scene in front of him, Zhang Hai's desire to return to the manor was even more urgent. However, before returning to Winthrop, Zhang Hai and the others still had to make a detour to Boston. Because Zhang Hai received news that his precious shield had been repaired, and after hearing that the car had been repaired, Chijia, also known as Bernice, still remembered that Zhang Hai said that he would buy her a car, so she urged Zhang Hai to buy a car first. The exhaustion of sitting on a plane for more than 10 hours disappeared in an instant in front of a car. Zhang Hai didn't care about this. Anyway, he was buying a car. His speed of buying a car was quite fast. If he fancied a car, he would buy it directly. There was no other way. How did things this way? Since it had been decided, Zhang Hai didn't say anything. After speaking to Robbins Garcia, the two F-750 that came to pick them up turned the steering wheel, got off the highway, and drove toward the city of Boston. It seemed that the two cars, when they came out, could almost pull a motorcade when they went back. Based on their understanding of Zhang Hai, as long as this guy went to the car dealership, he was destined to not return empty-handed. Was it really just to buy a car for Bernice? Hee. If Zhang Hai took a fancy to something he liked, it would be strange if he didn't buy it. For their boss, Zhang Hai, Robbins Garcia, and the others had already figured out his routine. He was quite willing to spend money in this regard, but it didn't matter. They knew that Zhang Hai had this spare money. This was only the income of last year. Not to mention buying a car, even buying a passenger plane was possible, not to mention that their fishing farm was about to start selling. Chapter 669. Hello, Mr. Zhang. We have already prepared your car for you. Seeing Zhang Hai and the others walk in, the manager, who had already received the news, walked to Zhang Hai with a smile. The privileges of the rich in the United States really made ordinary people feel quite unbalanced. That's great. In addition to picking up the car today, I also want to see what kind of car I want to buy. Let me see my car first. Hearing the manager's words, this wasn't the first time Zhang Hai dealt with him, so he wasn't polite and smiled. When the manager heard Zhang Hai's instructions, he immediately smiled and led Zhang Hai to the garage next to him. Zhang Hai looked at his former tank and couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This bulletproof car was actually destroyed by a deer. Who would believe it if he told others? But this was really the truth. When the deer rushed, coupled with the original strength of the car, it could really insert the antlers into his engine. This was something that couldn't be helped. Now looking at the brand new car in front of him, Zhang Hai patted the car door with satisfaction and then nodded to the manager. He was quite satisfied with the car's repair. It was basically like a new car, but it still had the unique taste of Zhang Hai. Okay, this car is well repaired. I will drive this car directly in a while. I want to buy a car. Let's go and pick one. Patting the front cover of his beloved car, Zhang Hai said happily. At the same time, he looked at Qi Jia. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, the manager naturally smiled and led everyone to the distant exhibition hall. He knew that there would be business to do when Zhang Hai came. However, just as everyone walked out of the garage and was about to go to the exhibition hall, in an instant, a car quickly drove in front of them. When they saw the car, Zhang Hai and the others didn't care at first. When the car drove straight toward them, they panicked a little, especially when the sharp-eyed Zhang Hai found that there was no driver in the car. Who the F***? CK. This car doesn't have a driver. Get out of the way. Looking at the approaching car, Zhang Hai couldn't help but yell. Upon hearing Zhang Hai's words, Robbins Garcia and Philemon Turner, who had been driving over, immediately jumped to the side. Chijia's reaction was not slow either. She immediately pulled her sister to the side. Although Delina and Marion were scared out of their wits, fortunately, Azalina also dodged to the side. Seeing that there was no one else behind him, Zhang Hai also dodged instantly. Just as they were about to watch the car crash into the garage in the distance, the car began to slow down in front of Zhang Hai and the others. It even stopped directly in front of Zhang Hai and the others. Seeing this scene, Zhang Hai and the others were stunned. They looked at each other with some doubts. As for the manager, he was also scared just now. The speed of the car was about 10 miles per hour. If it really hit someone, although it was not fatal, if something happened, it would be his responsibility. Zhang Hai and the others were all pampered. Fortunately, nothing happened. Seeing the car stop, the manager immediately walked to the door with a gloomy face. Originally, he thought that it was a child who drove the car and couldn't see the situation in front, so it went on a rampage. But when he walked to the side of the car, he was shocked because there was no one in the car at this time. What the hell? Feeling the warm sun shining on his body, the manager felt a chill in his heart. The temperature of the sun was obviously not enough to dispel the panic in his heart. He couldn't help but look at Zhang Hai and the others. And when he looked, Jiang Hai and the others were also a little panicked because Jiang Hai also saw this scene. If there was no one driving, it was understandable that the car slipped away because the handbrake was not pulled, but what the hell was the car stopping just now? I feel like I shouldn't buy it from you. After thinking about it, Jiang Hai still felt that it was better for him to run away first. It was better to believe in these things than not. Most importantly, Jiang Hai himself was also a member of the supernatural. Okay. To be honest, when he heard Jiang Hai's words, the manager smiled reluctantly. After all, he didn't want to lose this customer. But the problem now was that he couldn't explain what was going on. It was too scary. Jiang Hai wanted to run away, but he was willing. Manager, there was no accident just now, right? However, just as the manager was about to send Jiang Hai and the others away, an employee of the car shop hurriedly ran over. Seeing that everyone was fine, he breathed a sigh of relief. What's the matter? Let's talk about it later. This car, let's leave it here first. What the hell? Looking at the employee who came over, the manager couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the car in front of him, he couldn't help but whisper, "Hey boss, this is not a ghost. This is an autopilot function." Hearing the manager's words, the employee here couldn't help but laugh and say, "Autopilot?" Hearing his words, Jiang Hai, who was about to run away, couldn't help but stop temporarily. What does this mean? This car is an all-electric car. It's a new product of Tesla. It has a system similar to our mobile phones. It can bind the user. This is the newly developed summoning function just like this. Although the employee didn't know Jiang Hai and the others, he knew that the guests accompanied by the manager must be big customers. He also saw that Jiang Hai and the others were scared just now. He also had the responsibility to solve the riddle. Then he took out his mobile phone and trotted to the distance. Then he gave an order. Other engines had the same number of cylinders and horsepower, but this thing depended on the kilowatt hour. The cheapest was 60 kilowatt hours, and the most expensive was 90 kilowatt hours. But the disadvantages were obvious. First, it was not convenient to charge. A full charge could run more than 500 kilometers, but charging it from zero would take more than 10 hours. Fast charging would damage the battery, and it would take 4.5 hours. When other cars ran out of gas, they would go to the gas station to refuel. Even if they went to the gas station, it would take them half an hour to refuel. But this car needed more than 4 hours to charge, so it was destined that this car was not suitable to be driven too far away. In theory, the speed of the car was 250 kilometers per hour, but in fact, the fastest speed was 140 kilometers per hour. In China, this car was sold for more than $1 million, but it could only reach 100 kilometers per hour. It was indeed a bit of a loss, but it was very cool to use this black technology. So Jiang Hai looked at this car and, to be honest, he was very tempted. When he thought about how he would act cool in the future, he could say something to his phone when he walked out of the restaurant, and then the car would automatically drive to his side. Thinking about it, it was still very exciting. Furthermore, the choice of this car was not small. In addition to the S-Series, there was also the X-Series, which was an SUV, and the Roadster, which was a sports car. The X-Series was slightly more expensive than the S-Series, but the Roadster was more expensive. The cheapest one cost at least $90,000. The most expensive one was nearly $200,000, but Jiang Hai really didn't lack money. Glancing at Qijie and the others' shining eyes, Jiang Hai decided to buy a car, not a car, but a car, an SUV, and a sports car. He didn't lack money anyway. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the manager and the staff here were very happy. This business was finally done. Jiang Hai always focused on buying cars, and it was really convenient to buy a car in the United States. In the car shops here, all kinds of procedures could be done. It could be said that they could directly buy a car with money and drive it on the road. It was that simple. After everything was done, Jiang Hai drove one car, Azalina drove another, and Qijie drove another. A group of 6 cars drove to the manor in a mighty manner. On the contrary, Jiang Hai's previous favorite, the battle shield, was ignored at this time. It was driven back by the other party staff. However, Jiang Hai couldn't help it. This car was fine to drive around here. If they went out of town, he had to drive his war shield. When they returned to the manor, Zhang Hai found that the outer wall that was originally damaged by the impact of the deer herd had been repaired at this time. After knowing that Zhang Hai and the others had returned, Aphrodite and the others had already prepared food and waited for Zhang Hai at home for a long time. Naturally, Robbins Garcia and the others wouldn't be third wheels. After they left, Zhang Hai and the others happily gathered together. Originally, after Zhang Hai left, the villa had been very quiet. Even Aphrodite and the others felt that something was missing. This time, when Zhang Hai came back, they were the most excited. After all, Zhang Hai hadn't been away for so long in the past. That night, Qijia and Xia went to sleep first. Firstly, it was because they were too tired. Secondly, it was because they wanted to let Aphrodite and the others have a good night with Zhang Hai. That night, the lights in Zhang Hai's room almost didn't go out. It wasn't until the next morning that the lights went out. Then, in the afternoon, Zhang Hai and the others came out of the room. It was obvious what they were doing that night. Aphrodite and the others also used the body mixing technique to curry favor with Zhang Hai. For them, the meaning of their existence was to curry favor with Zhang Hai. They didn't want to be the key people by Zhang Hai's side, but they wanted to be an existence that Zhang Hai could vent his anger on. As long as they could stay here, that was enough. At least for them, it was enough. It was said that a woman's home was a hero's grave. Zhang Hai wasn't a hero, so he stayed in a woman's home quite well. For 3 days in a row, Zhang Hai and the others stayed in the villa and made out with each other. Later, even Qijia and Xia joined in. The only people in the villa who didn't have that kind of relationship with Zhang Hai were Delina, Marian, and Azalina, who had long had feelings for Zhang Hai. Naturally, they were much bolder in the villa in this way. The first few days of March flew by. As the temperature rose day by day, one of Winthrop's annual grand festivals was put on the agenda. Yes, the Poseidon Festival. After the Poseidon Festival, it meant that the Poseidon Festival was worshipped to the Poseidon and they could go into the sea to catch fish. Unknowingly, Zhang Hai had been raising fish for a year, and it was time to harvest. Chapter 670. Yo, what wind blew Uncle Wallace here? Hurry up and sit inside. Looking at the car slowly stopping in front of his manor, Zhang Hai said with a smile, but at this time, his parking lot can't be parked because there is a construction team working here. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also glared at him, then parked the car in the distance, opened the door, and walked over. Have you been busy recently? Looking at Zhang Hai, Mayor Wallace asked him with a smile, at the same time looking at the construction team in front of him. It's okay, my main job is to look after it. There's no other way, now I'm the only idle person in the manor. Shrugging, Zhang Hai said to Mayor Wallace. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his words, Zhang Hai couldn't help but sigh. Indeed, leisure time will always pass, and now the manor has begun to get busy. Since entering March, Zhang Hai's manor has basically been in a rhythm of foot hitting the back of the head. First of all, in March, the snow melted, and Zhang Hai said that he wants to build a parking lot and a greenhouse. The greenhouse is easy to build. This thing is built quickly, but building this parking lot and the road passage is an out-and-out big project. There are 2 roads to build, one from Zhang Hai's villa to the dock, half of the road in the middle to the airport, and of course, to the cowshed. The other road needs to be built along the river to block the streetlights. Just these 2 roads will be very troublesome. Zhang Hai is not distressed about the money. He doesn't care about the money, but this time is really a lot, and it will take almost a month to finish. Second, the flowers are blooming in spring. Zhang Hai and the others should be planting, and a new round of cultivation will start in the vineyard. In this way, Aphrodite and the others almost grew up in the vineyard, and they didn't come to Zhang Hai's manor recently. Qijia and Xia began to plant vegetables with Delina and Marian. Because many women in this manor have gone to the seaside villa, the heavy responsibility of planting vegetables was handed over to them. Of course, in the evening and in the morning, they will also come to plant vegetables. In fact, they are the main force, and Chia and the others are more just watching or watering. But this also needed someone to keep an eye on it. Azalina and Conrad, the two bodyguards, weren't idle. They went to gather grass. Don't forget, Jiang Hai and Du Feimin still had a business deal to do. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if they had the time to do it. Everyone has something to do, and only Jiang Hai is idle, so he came to supervise the work. The greenhouse can be built in a few days. It is simple, after all. Jiang Hai doesn't plan to build a big one, but the parking lot and the two roads are very time-consuming. In addition, Jiang Hai made the best. The bottom is made of steel, the pillars are made of cement and reinforced stone, and the roof is made of alloy, making the whole road very sturdy. According to the person who took over this project, not to mention just snow, rain, or tornadoes, it is absolutely impossible to cause any damage to the parking lot. If there was a problem within 5 years, he wouldn't ask for money and would make it up for free. Originally, he was only supposed to look at 3 years, but he dared to say 5 years. Jiang Hai also believed him. He also didn't have the habit of talking about money, and directly started to work. Unknowingly, 3 days have passed. The parking lot is gradually taking shape. This is a good thing. Originally, you are busy here. I shouldn't have come to ask, but you are now the backbone of this place. I feel that it is better to ask, will you participate in this year's Poseidon Festival? Seeing that Jiang Hai is busy, Mayor Wallace hesitated, but still decided to ask Jiang Hai. After all, this matter is not related to Jiang Hai. It is related to the situation of the town. Poseidon Festival? Hearing this, Jiang Hai's mind couldn't help but drift back to last year, the day after he killed the mountain lion for the first time last year. It seems to be the town's Poseidon Festival, but because he is not very familiar with the people in the town at that time, he only went to participate in the parade. But at that time, he also copied a lot of good things, such as the treasure map of the shipwrecks. Those are absolute night weeds. But this year, he is not going to go to the shipwrecks at sea. He has a lot of things to do this year: fishing at the end of March, tea harvesting at the beginning of April, attending the New York Beef Show in the middle of April. Buning will go to France to participate in the Magaun wine competition at the end of the month, the Brussels International Wine Competition in May. The situation in June depends on the situation. But it is just summer. It is not a good time to go out to sea. In the summer, the storms at sea were very strong, so they had to avoid June. In July, they had to harvest lobsters, and in August, they had to harvest tuna. Of course, they could also go fishing. In late August, they would harvest grapes, and in September, they would harvest grapes to make wine. In October, it would be winter again, and the year would pass. So, although Jiang Hai usually looked like a sloppy person, his schedule was actually very full. The train runs fast because every carriage has a power unit. It is not a bullet train, it is a train. If you want to run fast, you have to rely on the engine. Although Jiang Hai doesn't do anything, he is the engine in this manner. There is no doubt about it. He doesn't have to do anything, but he has to be here. Listening to Mayor Wallace's words, this Poseidon Festival doesn't seem to be like last year, where it is just a parade. Jiang Hai doesn't know what to do. After thinking about it, he thinks it is better to ask first. Is this something that I must participate in? I don't know much about this. Scratching his head, Jiang Hai asked Mayor Wallace. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace also explained to Jiang Hai. Just like what Robbins Garcia and Jiang Hai said last year, the Poseidon Festival is actually a superstition. Pray hope that the fish will be abundant and the wind will be calm, and so on. Last year, Jiang Hai didn't fish. He only went into the sea to catch some fish, so it didn't matter. However, if he wants to fish this year, it might not be good if he doesn't participate in the Poseidon Festival. Therefore, Jiang Hai thought for a while and called Edward Anderson first. Sure enough, it was just as Jiang Hai thought. They want to fish this year, so they must participate in the Poseidon Festival. After receiving the news, Jiang Hai also looked at Mayor Wallace. Uncle Wallace, we're going to participate. Tell us what you need us to do. Is it money or something? Looking at Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai said seriously. Although he didn't believe in these things, sometimes these habits still had to be respected. Besides, since Edward Anderson said that he must participate, Jiang Hai wouldn't embarrass his second-in-command. I don't need you to pay, but after all, your status is different now. So, if you want to participate, you can't just follow the crowd like last year. This year, I'm going to let you hold the Poseidon's gift. Hearing that Jiang Hai was going to participate, Mayor Wallace also nodded in satisfaction. Then he said the purpose of his visit. You want me to hold it? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was stunned. Jiang Hai knew very well what the Poseidon's gift was. Last year he saw it. It was the Poseidon slug of the Atlantic Ocean. But last year, he took the initiative to help, but Mayor Wallace didn't let him touch it. According to Mayor Wallace's words, only the mayor could hold the Poseidon's gift. But what does this mean this year? Seeing the doubt in Jiang Hai's eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh and explain to Jiang Hai, every year, there are only 3 possibilities for the person holding the sea god's gift. The first is an elder that everyone trusts, the second is a noble divine envoy, and the third is a hero. As for me, although it's a bit embarrassing to say this, as the mayor of this town, I'm still a trustworthy elder. Among us, there are no divine envoys, nor were there any heroes before, but it's different now. Seeing the doubt in Jiang Hai's eyes, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh and explained to Jiang Hai. How is it different? Hearing these 3 names, Jiang Hai tried to compare them, but it seemed that he couldn't match any of them. I'm definitely not an elder. This is fixed. Secondly, I shouldn't be a brave person. This is also fixed. Thirdly, it's even more impossible for me to be an oracle. If I say that I'm from the East, it would make sense. After all, I have a dragon tattoo on my body. But this is the United States. The dragons in the United States are big lizards with wings. What kind of oracle am I? So after hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai was even more confused. How can I hold this thing? Because you are an angel who brings the residents of the town to a better life, so you are also considered an oracle. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but laugh. Hearing his explanation, Jiang Hai instantly became Spartan. If I'm considered an oracle like this, he seemed to see him wearing a priest's outfit and then saying to the beautiful nun kneeling in front of him, Come, child of the Lord, this is the trumpet of heaven. Please put it in your mouth affectionately. Can I? I'll just fork out the money and follow you, just like last year. After hesitating, Jiang Hai said to Mayor Wallace. He was really a person who was afraid of trouble, and now it seemed that it was really troublesome. Haha, don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time. It's only 2 days. When the time comes, I will come to you in advance. The first day is a walk, and the second day is the ceremony. Just do as I say. Hearing Jiang Hai's obvious excuses, Mayor Wallace shook his head. Jiang Hai finally agreed. He wouldn't easily stop Jiang Hai from doing it, so he patted Jiang Hai's shoulder, and this matter was settled. Then, while Jiang Hai was a little depressed, he drove away happily. However, Jiang Hai waited until evening and told everyone about this matter. Originally, he thought that because this would delay the construction period, everyone would object. But unexpectedly, Robbins Garcia and the others were extremely excited because in their view, the annual Poseidon Festival was extremely sacred. It was like the torchbearers of the Olympic Games. In some people's eyes, it was a thankless task. Anyway, they didn't want to watch the Olympic Games and didn't pay attention to it. They would rather sleep at home or do their own things if they had the time. But in some people's eyes, it was a supreme honor. Being responsible for holding the gift of Poseidon during the Poseidon Festival was a supreme honor, at least in Winthrop. Edward Anderson and the others would never be able to touch the fish tank in their lifetime. The fish tank represented the supreme honor of Winthrop. Edward Anderson remembered that when he was young, he had a friend who was curious about the gift of Poseidon. He sneaked into the room where the gift of Poseidon was kept at night and accidentally broke the fish tank. Later, he was directly expelled from the town. Since then, Edward Anderson had never seen him again. This showed how important this position was in the eyes of the people of Winthrop. Now, Jiang Hai was going to hold the fish tank. In their eyes, this wasn't a fish tank. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the Holy Grail. Don't worry, boss. I'll call my wife over to help you look after the construction. There will definitely be no problems. You must practice well. Looking at Jiang Hai eagerly and admiringly, Philemon Turner said with a serious face. He didn't even hesitate to ask his wife to take leave and come back to look after it. Hearing Philemon's words, the other people of Winthrop nodded enthusiastically. They couldn't be careless about this matter. Looking at their fanatical looks, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say for a while. In the end, he could only smile a little awkwardly. At the same time, he was also a little curious about the mission he had to complete.
Time passed day by day.
Du Feynman had already sent people over to collect the first batch of fodder. The greenhouse was also completely built and ready for use. After the seedlings were planted, the fertile land allowed the seedlings that had frozen to death in the winter to grow sturdily. The weather had also reached about 10 degrees, and the annual Sea God Festival began again at this time. The day before, Jiang Hai left home and was busy from morning to night. He walked the route between the town and the seaside no less than 20 times. After remembering all the requirements clearly, he had to endure Mayor Wallace's constant nagging. Fortunately, the sea god ceremony began on the second day after the most nagging day had passed. Chapter 671. There was no exact time for the Poseidon Festival. Last year, the Poseidon Festival was held in early summer, but this year, it was held in early spring. There was also a meaning behind this because when it was held, the things that were sought were also different. Last year, the festival was held in summer, and the festival was only for peace and tranquility. Because there were no more fish in Winthrop at that time, there was no need to go out to sea. Therefore, the festival was held in summer, and there were no storms or anything like that. But this year was different. There were tourists this year. Even if there were fewer fish in the sea, they still had to bring the tourists out to play. This was also considered to be a source of income. Therefore, since the new year, the town had already decided that the Poseidon Festival would be held in March, just in time for the fishing season. Early in the morning, all the residents of the town who were still free gathered in the town. In the town square, Mayor Wallace gave the order, and the Poseidon Festival began. Jiang Hai also cooperated and lifted the huge fish tank. In an instant, everyone started to shout. They had to admit that it was really quite impressive. Then the person in charge of the music in front led the way, and the crowd set off. The group of people walked towards the seaside in a mighty manner. The most dazzling person in the crowd was Jiang Hai, who was holding the fish tank. He had to admit that it was an honor. However, it was actually quite tiring. The fish tank was not small and could hold about 10 kilograms of water. In addition to the weight of the tank, it weighed about 25 kilograms. Although it didn't seem like much, it was impossible to not be tiring to carry it all the way to the seaside. When Mayor Wallace held the fish tank, he could even change his posture or something. This was also the privilege of being an old man. However, Jiang Hai was young and strong, so he was too embarrassed to change his posture or something like that. Therefore, he kept holding the fish tank. Unlike yesterday's rehearsal, there were a lot of people today, and naturally, they walked very slowly. Fortunately, there were no other programs. After walking for more than 2 hours, Jiang Hai and the others walked from the town to the seaside. Along the way, not only did they attract a large number of townspeople, but there were also many tourists who were very interested in the parade. They took videos along the way and followed the parade. They were also very interested in the Atlantic blue dragon that Jiang Hai was hugging. Unfortunately, the townspeople didn't allow them to get too close. Although most of the tourists were ordinary people and kind-hearted people, there were still some who liked to cause trouble. If the blue dragon and the fish tank were damaged, it would be meaningless to chase him out. Therefore, the best way was to prevent tourists from getting close. Just let them watch from afar. However, this also made the tourists very curious. Along the way, there were more and more people. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's hard days would come to an end one day. After walking for more than 2 hours, he finally arrived at the seaside. After Mayor Wallace finished his prayer, Jiang Hai put the fish tank into the sea. After watching the blue dragon and the fish tank swim into the sea and disappear completely, he raised the empty fish tank. Then, the townspeople shouted loudly. This meant that the sea god had received their gift. At this time, the sea god ceremony was officially over. After Jiang Hai handed the fish tank to the townspeople, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Then he walked to a tent at the side to rest. This tent was specially prepared for him yesterday. It was to prevent him from not having a place to rest when he was tired. It used to belong to Mayor Wallace, but now it belonged to Jiang Hai. The tent itself wasn't small. Not to mention sitting, it could even fit 2 or 3 people lying down. Because Mayor Wallace used to hold meetings here in the past, the tent was very sturdy and of good quality. As long as the zipper was pulled up, the people inside could see the situation outside. However, the people outside couldn't see the situation inside. How are you? Are you tired? Today was the Sea God ceremony, so Robbins Garcia and Edward Anderson had other things to do, so they couldn't come. However, Chi Jia and the others still came to watch the fun. When they saw Jiang Hai sitting inside the tent, they couldn't help but smile and walk over. Looking at them, Jiang Hai moved his arms and said with a smile, "Phew, I'm fine. It's just that my arms are a little sore." Originally, Jiang Hai wanted them to massage his arms. However, it was obvious that they didn't hear or deliberately miss the second half of Jiang Hai's sentence. Instead, they laughed and played together. "Well, if you're tired, take a rest. Let's go to the market over there." After ignoring Jiang Hai, Chi Jia said with a smile, and went to the market over there with Chia, Delina, and Marion. Of course, Azalina was always by their side. Otherwise, Jiang Hai would be worried. Originally, Jiang Hai also wanted to go to the market to take a look, but now that he was indeed a little tired, he was ready to take a rest. However, before he could lie down, another set of footsteps came from afar. "Hi, Jiang." Upon hearing this voice, Jiang Hai turned around and took a look. A trace of embarrassment flashed across his face, but he quickly concealed it. Then, he smiled unnaturally because looking at the woman in front of him, he knew that Jiang Hai wasn't that easy to deal with. "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me?" Seeing Jiang Hai's somewhat tangled gaze, the girl didn't care. She sat directly next to Jiang Hai and then smiled at Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also touched his head. How could he not recognize her? "How is that possible, Kelly? I haven't seen you recently." Yes, the person in front of him was none other than Kelly Solon. When Jiang Hai was in the bathroom on the second floor of Hodge Circe's house, something that shouldn't have happened with her and Delia George. Later, Jiang Hai made it clear to Delia, but he couldn't say anything to Kelly. Delia had a boyfriend. Jiang Hai could use this thing as an excuse, but Kelly didn't. This made Jiang Hai a little overwhelmed. But Kelly didn't seem to care much about this relationship. After that day, although she occasionally sent some text messages to Jiang Hai, they didn't have much contact. Today, her sudden arrival caught Jiang Hai a little off guard. "What else can I do?" "Find a job. My dad asked me to help out at the flower shop, but I feel that I'm still young. If I don't go out and find a job, I'll be sorry for my age." With a shrug, Kelly Solon said somewhat speechlessly. Of course, there was one thing she didn't say. Children in the United States were actually somewhat rebellious. After they turned 18, most of them were unwilling to live with their parents, let alone work for them. Not only would they earn less, but they would also be mistreated. So, compared to working at home, they were more willing to go out. This was the main reason why Kelly had been looking for a job. "Well, have you ever thought about continuing to study in school?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai hesitated and said to her. To be honest, Jiang Hai knew that Kelly Solon was looking for a job at the very beginning, but he didn't want to take this job. But after all, something had happened between the two, and now they were friends, so it didn't matter if he helped her find a job. Postgraduate entrance exam? Hey, Jiang, don't joke around. It's possible for me to take the postgraduate entrance exam, but the problem is that my major is not very good. No research team will want me. With a shrug, Kelly Solon said helplessly. The postgraduate entrance exam in the United States was indeed a good place to go. In fact, it was the same in China, but it was not so easy to take the postgraduate entrance exam in the United States. It wasn't as if you could pass the exam. You needed to participate in some research groups. You had to become a graduate student of those professors so that you could take the exam. In China, this was more of a title, but in Boston, you really needed some research ability. Leave this to me. Looking at Kelly Solan's appearance, Jiang Hai smiled. He would help her to the end. Since something had happened between them that shouldn't have happened, then he would help her. Then he took out his mobile phone, found a number on it, and dialed it. After the phone rang a few times, an excited voice came from the phone. Hey, Jiang, you must know that our research has made progress, so you called, right? Haha, it's really great. Listening to this person's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment, and then his eyes couldn't help but light up. Research has made progress? What does this mean? Wait a minute, Professor Baker, Gerard. I don't know what progress your research has made. Please speak slowly. Hearing the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but speak immediately. He had invested a lot of money in this research institute. If there had been no results, then Jiang Hai would be very helpless. Although this institution was first established not to make money, but to cover for his manor, the effect was still good so far. At least, it blocked a lot of scholars and the like. But if this research institute could really research something, it would also be a good benefit for them. Haha, I crossbred your cattle with the North American bison applied from Yellowstone Park. I found that there was no reproductive isolation between the two species, and the calf born was not only smarter, but also similar in size to the North American bison, but its personality was more inclined to be like the Angus cattle. However, I still don't know if this kind of cattle is suitable for raising. Everything needs to be studied first. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Professor Baker, Gerard couldn't help but speak briskly. It could be heard that he was in a good mood now. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also raised his eyebrows. A cross between Angus cattle and American bison? It sounds a bit interesting. But I don't know if this thing can be raised, but I'll leave it to Professor Baker, Gerard. Anyway, he doesn't know much about it. After congratulating Professor Baker, Gerard, he gradually calmed down. Jiang, what's the matter with you calling me? Now that Baker, Gerard was in a good mood, he also remembered that Jiang Hai didn't call because he knew about his research results. It meant that Jiang Hai was looking for him for something else. Jiang Hai was his boss. He had been researching for almost a year, but he didn't get anything, so he was still quite careful with Jiang Hai. Here's the thing, I have a friend who is a student at your B City University. Because it's not easy to find a job after graduation, she is preparing to take the postgraduate entrance exam. I just want to ask if you have any postgraduate spots left. If you do, I'll let her take the exam. Hearing Baker, Gerard's words, Jiang Hai also explained his intentions, but he was still a little careful when he said it. He was also afraid that the old professor would think too much. Generally, such intellectuals had a lot of things to do. It would be troublesome if he thought that Kelly was a spy sent by him. However, Jiang Hai was obviously thinking too much. The Americans didn't pay attention to the saying, don't suspect the people you use, don't use the people you suspect. In such a research institution in the United States, there must be at least one, or even several investors. This was because they had to watch these people to see if they were spending money recklessly, if they had good patents, and if there were things that were beneficial to the investors. Who would be like Jiang Hai, who just invested the money and didn't care about it. Now that Jiang Hai sent someone over, it could be said that Baker, Gerard, was overjoyed. Of course, this is no problem.
Just let her take the exam.
Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Baker, Gerard couldn't help but pat his chest and said. Hearing that he agreed, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief. After making an okay gesture to Kelly, Soren next to him, he exchanged a few more words with Baker, Gerard, and then hung up the phone. Really? You really helped me find the professor? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kelly, Soren couldn't help but say excitedly. Well, Professor Baker, Gerard, should be the professor of evolutionary chemistry for your college students. Now he is doing a plan for the quality of cattle and grass on the ranch for me. You can go to him these days and discuss with him. Then study hard and pass the exam. Looking at Kelly Soren, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Kelly, Soren couldn't help but rush over excitedly and kiss Jong Hai heavily on the lips. Originally, when she talked to Jong Hai about her work, it was more of a complaint. But she didn't expect that Jong Hai would actually help her solve this problem. To be honest, this really made her excited. Jong, I must repay you well. I don't know if you are in the tent by the sea, Kelly said to him with watery eyes. It can be seen that she is really interested in Jong Hai. Chapter 672. Hey, boss, what are you thinking about? Looking at Jong Hai standing on the bow, Edward Anderson couldn't help but walk out with a pipe. While smoking, he asked Jong Hai. Hearing his words, Jong Hai also turned his head and smiled at him. Oh, nothing. I'm just worried about how much fish there will be in a while. Hearing his words, Jong Hai couldn't help but smile and say, Don't worry, boss. We will definitely have a bumper harvest this year. Looking at Jong Hai's appearance, Edward Anderson couldn't help but smile, then said with great certainty. Hearing his words, Jong Hai also smiled and continued to look at the sea in the distance. 3 days have passed since the Poseidon ritual. On that day, Jong Hai and Kelly almost did it in the tent, cough cough, but unfortunately, it didn't happen in the end because Chia came back to deliver fruits to Jong Hai. Fortunately, she didn't take off her clothes at that time, otherwise, she would have been caught red-handed. But even so, Chia's suspicious gaze still made Jong Hai a little speechless. In the evening, Chia deliberately went to Jong Hai's room and left satisfied after 2 hours. In the following days, Jong Hai and the others were still busy, but no matter how busy they were, Jong Hai still had to come for the first fishing trip. Jong Hai's fishing boat was assembled in Boston. When he first assembled it, he considered the problem of fishing in the future, so Jong Hai's fishing boat was not small. It braved the wind and waves on the sea, and it was still very stable. Don't worry, boss. If you are really worried, come in with me to take a look at the sonar. Although Jong Hai didn't speak, he still looked a little worried. Edward Anderson suddenly said to Jong Hai. Hearing his words, Jong Hai was stunned for a moment. Then he felt that it would be good to take a look, so he walked into the cabin. At this time, Marin Rupert was driving the boat. In the beginning, he asked him to drive the plane and the boat. This was also what he needed to do. Next to the driver's seat, there was a sonar device. At this time, the screen was constantly jumping. Small dots appeared under the sonar. These small dots represented schools of fish. It can be seen that the fishing resources of Jong Hai Fishery were really not ordinary. We're still in the coral reef area. Let's drive into the sea first. Looking at these small dots, Edward Anderson explained with a smile. In the past, Edward Anderson and the others went out to sea almost every day. In addition to feeding the fish and testing the water quality, they spent thousands of dollars of diesel to pave the way for today's trip. The sonar has the function of capturing and marking. Every time they cruised in the fishing ground, they would mark the fish they encountered and catch them in order. They didn't just find a place to cast the net. The types of fish, the size of the fish, and so on were all knowledge. Jong Hai naturally didn't understand this. Although he knew that there were a lot of fish in his fishing ground, if he didn't catch them, they wouldn't be his fish. After all, these fish were very smart. It wasn't so easy to catch them. Therefore, Jong Hai was more or less worried at this time. The boat sailed very fast. Even if Jong Hai was worried, the fishing boat quickly left the coral reef area and entered the water. With a series of rapid sounds, Edward Anderson and the others were ready to catch the fish. Their first target was the first batch of fish that Jong Hai ordered last year, the American redfish. When they first bought these fry from Iron Bull, these fry were only as long as an index finger and as thick as 2 fingers. But now, after a year of growth, these fish could be raised to 2 caddies in weight and 20 centimeters in length in an ordinary fishing ground. However, it was obvious that Jong Hai's fishing ground wasn't an ordinary fishing ground. These fish had absorbed Jong Hai's spirit chi since they were young. Oh, no, they were still spirit blood back then. In addition, they ate food that contained spirit chi, so their growth was quite terrifying. In Jong Hai's eyes, these fish had basically all grown to 2 caddies, which was about 4 caddies in weight. This could be seen from the sonar. Their individual size was about 30 centimeters long. This year was not the best time to catch the fish in the soaring dragon manner. Raising these fish for 3 years before catching them was actually the right way to go. But rice has to be eaten one bite at a time. First learn how to walk, then learn how to run. There has been no income from the fishery. Although they can rely on the ranch to support them, he always felt that it was not the case. Therefore, Zhang Hai decided to fish this year. After finding these American redfish, Marin Rupert took the helm. Edward Anderson was in charge of the fishing machine, and Tommy Charles, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian were in charge of setting the net. After everything was ready, Zhang Hai's fishing boat sailed in front of the school of fish. At Edward Anderson's command, all the fishing nets were cast into the sea. Then, Zhang Hai felt the boat sink and the speed of the boat slowed down instantly. However, no matter how slow it was still faster than the fish swimming. On the sonar display, Zhang Hai saw those small dots enter the fishing net one by one. When almost all the fish were caught in the net, Edward Anderson also started the engine. The turbine pulled the fishing net and began to pull it back. Tommy Charles and the others also opened the entrance of the ice cabin, ready to work at any time. As the fishing net was pulled up, it looked like a big bag. The front was empty, but when the fishing net left the water, Zhang Hai and the others showed joy on their faces. They saw that the empty fishing net had turned into a huge ellipsoid about 6 meters in diameter. It looked like a water droplet appearing in front of Zhang Hai and the others. When the fishing net was pulled to the entrance of the ice cabin, it opened. In an instant, countless American redfish fell onto the deck like rain. At this moment, the fishermen's work officially began. Because they had to pick the American redfish, they would directly slide into the ice cabin. Some other fish, as well as seaweed, would be thrown back into the sea. Looking at these fish, Zhang Hai was finally relieved. Guys, this is a gift from the sea god to us. Our boss is a man bestowed by the heavens. He gave this sea region countless fish. Looking at the fish on the ground, Edward Anderson stood up in front of the turbine and shouted loudly, "Harvest! Harvest!" Following his cry, Tommy Charles and the others followed suit. With the gradual depletion of the Atlantic fishing industry, they had not seen such a scene for a long time. Usually, when they went out to sea, they would not be able to catch so many fish in one go. With such a big net, it would be unfair if they did not catch at least half of the net's trash. Looking at these fish, to be honest, these fishermen were a little touched. For a moment, tears welled up in their eyes. But soon, they sorted out their thoughts. This was because their work was not done yet. Zhang Hai hired them not to reminisce about the past. What they needed to do was to help Zhang Hai make money. This was the most important thing. As the fish were sent into the ice cabin one by one, and the seaweed and other things were thrown back into the sea, Zhang Hai and the others were relieved. Of course, Zhang Hai had been following along to help. According to the number Edward Anderson saw on the turbine, these fish weighed a total of 5 tons. Of course, after deducting the remaining cinnabar water and other miscellaneous things, the net weight should be about 4 tons. This was already a pretty good harvest. Zhang Hai's net was very large, the kind with a diameter of 10 centimeters. Small fish would be missed instantly. Generally, the finished fish weighed about 2 catties. If they swam vertically, they could also get through if they were lucky. Only those guys that are more than 30 centimeters long will be caught in the net, and the ones that Zhang Hai caught are basically more than 40 centimeters long. According to Edward Anderson, there were about 3,000 American redfish in the shoal, and Zhang Hai caught about 2,000. The remaining 1,000 fish would grow bigger after a year of growth. Most importantly, they would leave seeds for the fishery. After dealing with these fish, Zhang Hai and the others continued to fish, galloping freely around Zhang Hai's fishery. The sonar fish finder was constantly capturing the fishing targets they had set, and Zhang Hai helped Tommy Charles to organize the fishing nets. After a while, they would throw this guy into the sea. As mentioned before, Zhang Hai's fishing boat had a total of 4 cabins. One was cold, which meant that it was filled with ice. This was used to preserve precious species of fish, such as blue spear or bluefin. The second was cold, which meant that there was no need for ice. The place to put ice was saved. The main purpose was to spray cold air inside, which could keep the fish fresh for a longer time. It was also used to preserve more advanced seafood. The last was the freezer. After being thrown in, the fish would be frozen into ice. It was generally used to preserve ordinary seafood. There was also a water storage room. This room was a separate warehouse. Its main function was to be in the water. When the boat was moving, the seawater would flow in from one end of the room and out from the other. The fish in this room could always be in contact with the seawater and ensure their survival. When Zhang Hai caught the blue spear, he used this trick. This trick was only effective for those extremely precious fish that had to be kept alive. Some people would say that the reason why these fish could survive was not because they were placed in the seawater, but because they had been swimming. Yes, this room was not small. When the seawater flowed, if the fish did not want to commit suicide and was directly hit by the current, it would need to swim continuously. But even so, the fish would be tired to death if they kept swimming like this. According to what Edward Anderson said when they were assembling it, the fish could only survive for a few days. This water silo can only allow the fish to live for one more day. Fortunately, the place where Zhang Hai sold the fish was not far away. After Zhang Hai and the others finished dealing with the fish, Marlin Rupert's voice came from the communication cabin. The second wave of fish had entered the range. Following Marlin Rupert's words, Zhang Hai and the others threw the fishing net into the sea again. After the previous incident, Zhang Hai and the others were much more relaxed this time. Sure enough, when the net came, it was another bumper harvest. They also got 5 tons of fish, but compared to the previous time, 95% of them were American redfish. It was undeniable that the fish resources on Zhang Hai's side were really rich. The most eye-catching fish in the net is the dozen or so dragonfish. This kind of fish is actually a type of grouper. It is also a type of marine predator fish. Although the size of these fish was not small when they were raised by Zhang Hai, but now they are even bigger. All the fish were more than half a meter long. Zhang Hai grabbed one and tested it. He couldn't help but be surprised. These guys seem to have eaten a lot this year. In a year, they had grown more than 100 catties, which was 50 kilograms. It was really troublesome for ordinary people to catch them. After patting this guy, Zhang Hai threw it into the freezer. The grouper's lineage was there, so it must be very valuable. In addition to the longfan, there were also American redfish, which was thrown into the freezer just now. There were also groupers, which were thrown into the ice. Most importantly, they caught more than 20 salmon. It was obvious that these fishes were gathered together for no good reason. These fishes were hunting fishes, and their food was the fish that they caught in the largest quantity. Translator's note: this chapter was sponsored by Patreon. Grabbing a small silver fish that was not too long, Zhang Hai asked Edward Anderson next to him, "This is a herring, right?" "Well, it's an Atlantic herring. It seems that these little guys were attracted by your fish farm." Looking at the small fish in Zhang Hai's hand, Edward Anderson narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. He was now calculating his income. The 2 waves of fish had a total of about 8 tons. After all, there were different types of meat. If the average price was $8 per kilogram, 8 tons would be 8,000 kilograms, and $8 per kilogram would be $64,000. It seemed that it wouldn't be a problem for him to make more than $100,000 today. Of course, the longfan, grouper, and salmon would not be priced at $8 per kilogram unless there was something wrong with their brains. Okay, deal with it. In addition to the herring, there were barracuda, mackerel, and Spanish mackerel. These fish were not raised by Zhang Hai, but Zhang Hai's place was indeed a treasure. Once these fish came, they did not want to leave. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.